this meeting of the Board of Education to order and rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, the next item on our agenda is the approval of the meeting agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda? Dr. Francis, do we have a second? Ms. Stowe, any discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda? 7-0, thank you very much. All right, next up is our consent agenda. These are some items we've already discussed at previous meetings. Do we have a motion to accept the consent agenda? Dr. Francis, second. Ms. O'Neill? All right, all those in favor of accepting the consent agenda? Passes 7-0, thank you very much. All right, we are ready for the school welcome. Mr. Grasso, step right up.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, board members, Central Office personnel, Hamilton Avenue staff, and guests. I am so very proud to welcome you to Hamilton Avenue School, celebrating our 103rd year as the cornerstone of the Chickahominy neighborhood of Greenwich. Before it was decided that Hamilton Avenue would be a STEM magnet, it was a Renaissance school. This year, we are experiencing a renaissance, and we look forward to the years ahead because there are a million things we haven't done, but just you wait. It's going to be like this all night. Tonight, we want to share some of the wonderful things that have happened here at Hamilton Avenue this year. One portion of the video highlights the math work that started in our grade 4 pilot classes. As teachers experienced the training and new learning, buzz began to circulate the building. Teacher collaboration and word of mouth has accelerated the PL process, and the teachers have been the agents of change. This is the way it should be, and I'm very proud to be a part of this positive change. Now, if you'll spare us 5 minutes and 47 seconds, this video will tell you about the school where it happens.
Welcome to Hamilton Avenue. Hamilton Avenue School provides a rigorous inquiry-based education with an emphasis on developing 21st century skills through a focus on science, technology, engineering, and math. Actively engaged learners work in a personalized environment to explore, problem solve, and practice critical thinking skills. One way we personalize learning is through Math Workshop, which is a framework that allows students to learn new math content each day, practice strategies in a variety of ways, and reflect on their learning. All students meet with their teacher daily in small groups for differentiated instruction. Students work independently at their seats to build their math reasoning, modeling, and problem-solving skills by working on assignments that match their specific skill levels. Students use technology to build math fluency using math websites or apps. Students work on hands-on activities and play math games to apply their math concepts to real-world situations.
Over here, 10 plus 4. It's 14. Okay, if you have time to try one more, I want you to flip it back.
How many did you take away? Okay, so what did you get? Okay, beautiful. Okay, let's look at the next problem. Let's start to trace. Now, tell me what you're going to start with. What are you going to start with? Okay, so start with the 7. Back. What's the answer? Okay.
As a STEM magnet, we believe a clear understanding of the inquiry process is critical to support teaching and learning across all content. Classes visit the STEM lab weekly to engage in science and engineering practices. It is here that students explore, ask questions, and test their theories. Students have an opportunity to dig in, get messy, and learn from their mistakes. Students then apply what they have learned as they try to understand the world around them and solve real-world problems. This past winter, Hamilton Avenue hosted its first ever camping. Students sang by the campfire with Mr. Rell as they enjoyed hot dogs. Mr. Grasso modeled how to build vocabulary and comprehension. Families then crawled into their tents for some quality family story time. Thanks to the generosity of the Greenwich Alliance for Education, Hamilton Avenue was able to create our Tinkering Studio, which has expanded our ability to create an inquiry-based learning environment. The Tinkering Studio is a place for inquiring minds to collaborate and learn valuable 21st century skills that will prepare our students for the future as learners who discover, design, experiment, and explore. At Hamilton Avenue, personalized learning extends in specials. 1 day a week, 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders attend an elective of their choice. Students engage in the creation of their own music, STEM investigations, dancing around the world, engineering, coding, sign language, team building activities in the gym, sculpture, clay, and 3D art. The results of their work can be found proudly displayed throughout the school. In February, our 5th grade began a partnership with Greenwich High School's Innovation Lab. During our visit, students engaged in day-long activities with high school mentors who guided them through 2 projects. Students learned the steps to success in project-based learning. The Innovation Lab students then visited us in May as we presented our exhibition projects. In late
Yeah. Said 5 minutes and 47 seconds. No pressure. Yeah, right. Is there a 16-year-old in the audience? Or a 6-year-old? There we go. There we go. In the front hall, there is a bulletin board that highlights some of the things we've accomplished as we work towards 1 million. It will take us at least another year to reach this goal. So I am grateful for the opportunity to lead this historic neighborhood school. The children and staff of Hamilton will not throw away our shot. I want to thank my staff for coming out tonight. I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. What do you say, no?
So we are going to talk about the STEM sale and our wonderful community garden. So please stop by and see all of the wonderful plants that the kids have planted in our garden on your way out.
Okay, I think we'll move on. Thank you. I'd like to invite my assistant principal, Mr. Rell, up, please. We have one special gift we'd like to give tonight.
Good evening. I guess I'm the 47 seconds.
Go.
Thank you for the opportunity to publicly recognize someone who's been a committed member of the Hamilton Avenue community for over a decade. Sorry, I have to hold it like this. Thank you is woefully inadequate to express our sincere appreciation for everything Miss Kathy Brunetti, our current PTA president, Kathy Roy. Kathy, there you are, has done to support our school. She's been at Hamilton Avenue as a parent for 13 years, which, by the way, is the equivalent of a full educational career from pre-K through high school graduation. In my brief time as Hamilton Avenue's assistant principal, I've had the opportunity to witness her commitment, involvement, and devotion to the entire Hamilton Avenue school community firsthand. True to the PTA's mission to make every child's potential a reality by engaging and empowering families and communities to advocate for all children, Kathy is a fierce advocate for all of Hamilton Avenue's children, staff, and community members at large. We would be sorely remiss not to seize this opportunity to recognize her for her years of incredible devoted service. She has deep roots at Hamilton Avenue School, and her constant presence in the building will be greatly missed. We wish her all the best, and we hope, Kathy, that you know you hold a special place in our heart.
So Kathy was actually on my board when I was the PTA president here, so she really has been here that long. And Mr. Grosso, and actually Barbara Neal taught her, so there you go. Mr. Grosso, I do want to thank you. Mr. Grosso was named the interim principal for Hamilton Avenue for this year, and he's actually staying on, and we appreciate the continuity and the service that you do. And it's an amazing school. The art show is tonight. If you get a chance, please do walk around. Video made me really, really sad. So this is my last year at elementary school, so I'm very, very sad. All right, with that, we will move on to our staff and student recognition. If you'll just give us a second to reset here. All right, so this is the fun part of the meeting. We get to recognize some of the greatness in the district. I don't have to hold it. Fantastic. So we've got some student and teacher recognitions tonight for a multitude of things. What I would ask is that everybody stay for all of the recognitions. When we're done, if you choose to leave, we'll miss you greatly. But for those students that are here, the next speakers after we finish the recognition are the student leaders from the high school. And so I would ask you to think about staying and listening to those leaders. So with that, we will call up the 2018 Connecticut All-State Music Festival invitees, introduced by Mr. Taylor.
Good evening. On behalf of Laura White, our arts coordinator, and my colleagues at the high school music department, and really of all the music teacher colleagues, K through 8, who've all played a role in the growth of our young student musicians, it's a pleasure to be here tonight to celebrate their accomplishments with you. Each year, more than 1,000 vocalists and instrumentalists from every public and private high school in Connecticut audition for acceptance to one of 4 all-state performing groups: band, chorus, orchestra, and jazz band. I'm delighted to report that this year, once again, Greenwich High School had more students selected for All-State than any other high school in the state. The students honored here this evening have spent many years working hard to become fine musicians, and although it was primarily their passion for music that has led them to this impressive achievement, their efforts have been continually supported by their parents and families, by our exceptionally strong K-12 music faculty, by our school administrators and our Board of Education, all of which place a high priority on arts education. I'm pleased to present to you the Greenwich High School representatives to the Connecticut All-State Music Festival, which took place in Hartford in April. As I call your name, please come up to the front to be congratulated and remain here until everyone has been called up. And I'd ask the audience to please hold applause until I've called everyone up. Thank you. We'll start with the members of the All-State Band. 6 students were selected for the All-State Band: Stanley Araki and Calabai, Timothy Kim, Chris McConnell, Jillian Olson. Oh, they just moved. Jillian Olson and Drew Tinkin. That's fine. We had two members, two students be selected for the All-State Orchestra, Cynthia Chen, violinist, and Marcos Aziaga, timpanist. Also, we had two students selected for the All-State Jazz Band, and they are Lucas Gazianis, pianist, and Samir Shankarlingan, bass player. We had 24 students selected for the All-State Chorus. Many of them are not able to be here tonight because they are on stage right now in the opening performance of Hairspray, which also plays tomorrow night and Saturday. So I hope you'll be able to go see that. I think it's 7 o'clock each night. Okay, Saturday, yeah? Okay, excellent. So the members of the All-State Chorus in alphabetical order are Andrew Alford, Hannah Bine, Alice Belshaw, Louisa Bound, Jack Bound, Hannah Doyle, Morgan Foster, Parker Freeman, William Hartford, William Hittel, Brian Luntz, Thomas Mayer, Josie Mangold, Cassandra Markison, Julia Markison, Grace Marinelli, Peter McDermott, Benjamin Michaels, Alexandra Orfanos, Catherine Pappas, Brennan Scarell, Matthew Sullivan, Yoshihiro Takahashi, and Emma Tolchinsky are All-State musicians for 2018.
To continue with our program, the math team state champions, introduced by Mr. Jones. Again.
And again and again and again. So hopefully we can keep this thing going. The Greenwich High School math team, as hard as it is to believe, had what could arguably be the strongest season in team history. GHS won the county title for the 9th consecutive season. And while the season state best math league was cut short by weather, the Cards won by the 3rd largest margin ever. In April, the team traveled to Bristol and won its 9th state title in the last 10 years, also by the 3rd largest margin ever. The 3rd place finish in the New England Regionals was GHS's highest finish ever, and was even more impressive considering that 5 of the 8 students were sophomores and freshmen. Things look bright for the future, certainly. The 2017-18 Connecticut State Math Champions, Stephen Ma, Jason Shi, Jovita Lee, Derek Shung, Zach Tenenbaum, Zach Wang, Kyle Shung, and Sam Florin. Ladies and gentlemen, the Connecticut State Championship match.
All right, we're going to go from math to science. We are in a STEM school, of course. The Science Bowl Regional Champions, introduced by Ms. Warno.
Thank you. Board members, Greenwich community, thank you so much for this honor to represent the science team to you. And I'm going to ask my students, the team, to come up first, and then I will present the award. Henry Sheen, Derek Zong, Phoebe Harch, and Nick Liu. Could you be so kind as to stand in front? Thank you. Raul Subramanian had to be at Hairspray tonight, so he was not able to join us. So each year the Department of Energy sponsors a regional competition that is a Jeopardy-like game that has topics such as biology, chemistry, physics, math, earth science, and energy. Our regional competition is at UConn Stores, and the GHS science team attended this competition, competing against 48 other Connecticut teams in Connecticut. They beat all 5 teams in the morning rounds, which allowed them to move on to a double elimination round. And in the afternoon, for the first time ever, a Fairfield County team won the regional championship at UConn Stores. This winning allowed them to this victory allowed them to compete at a national level at the U.S. Department of Energy, where they really rolled out the red carpet, and for 5 days we were down in Washington, D.C., taking part in the National Science Bowl. At the end of the competition, the top 2 teams went on to double elimination. So Derek, Nick, Phoebe, Henry, and Raul. So tonight we're here to congratulate you on your accomplishment. And I want the community to know that your integrity, passion for learning, and being part of the science community is beyond any vision of the graduate. So tonight we're here to celebrate your accomplishment. Ladies and gentlemen, these 5 students, for the first time ever, represented Connecticut at not only the regional level, but at the national level at the U.S. Department of Energy. They ranked #1 in Connecticut. They ranked #10 in the United States. Can you please continue with the
So we've done some arts, some math, some science. Here comes sports. The 2018 NSCA All-American Athlete of the Year Award, introduced by Mr. Media.
Thank you for recognizing Tyson Camizio. I've been teaching over 40 years, and this is the first athlete that I have recommended and nominated for the national award. The NSCA is the National Strength and Conditioning Association, which is affiliated with the Olympic team. They're based in Colorado Springs, and out of 22 positions in football, Tyson was recognized as being the first team in the United States. So for for us, it was an honor. It was not an easy task. It not only had to be done by my recommendation, but film, video, same thing, I guess. And his ability to not only embrace weightlifting, but sport in general. He was a role model for us, and he still is one of our captains and a role model for Greenwich High School. And we're proud to have him receive this award, and I thank everyone on the board and yourself for giving us this opportunity to be recognized. Tyson, come on up.
You can come closer, it's okay. Okay, so these students don't get here alone. In addition to their families, they've got their families at school, administrators and teachers. So we have with us the 2008 ITSE Administrator Network Award for Exemplary Leadership. Dr. Carabillo, come on. You're presenting.
Mr. Christopher Weiss from Riverside Elementary School is receiving the ISTE Award for Outstanding Leadership.
Yes, Christopher. We've got one more administrator award, 2018 Connecticut PTA Outstanding Administrator, introduced by Ms. Lindsay.
Good evening. My name is Phoebe Lindsay. I'm the co-chair of the PTA at Coscap School. And we would like to recognize Barbara Brennan Oxer, assistant principal at Coscap School, for her recent award as the Outstanding Assistant Principal in the state of Connecticut by the CTPTA. Barbara has been working in the Greenwich Public Schools for 16 years, 6 of those as the assistant principal at Coscap School. At every turn, Barbara has volunteered or been elected to represent the school or certain populations on district-wide committees, and recently won a seat on the RTM. She has especially contributed to the improvement and representation of the special education programs and community. Always prioritizing the experience of the child and student, she embodies professionalism and integrity while bringing to bear her superior knowledge of district policy and best educational practice. I particularly value the clarity Barbara brings to complex issues, and I am especially grateful for her sound judgment and excellent sense of humor. We congratulate you, Barbara, on this well-earned award.
Yeah, exactly. We like our pictures. So that actually concludes our recognition portion of the evening. Again, if the students would like to stay to hear the student government leaders, that would be fantastic. And we will get on with our meeting.
I saw victory. I
I know it's a little hard to get out of here, but we want to get on with this. We're going to try to get back on track here. Next up is our public hearing. The first speakers are the GHS student government leaders.
Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, and members of the board. I've been a member of student government since sophomore year, but I have to say this past year has been my favorite. I knew the start time would be an adjustment, but it allowed me, Greg, and the other members of student government to get our voices heard. One thing student government has taught me is how to be a student advocate, and for that I am eternally grateful. This year I had the opportunity to get involved and speak out. I hope that from now on the senior class president position will be more than fundraising and planning prom. It's about getting involved in any way you can. My one highlight of this year I would like to reflect on is SRO. I had been looking forward to participating in SRO since I was a freshman, but then I had no idea I'd be planning the entire event. With the help of the overall chairs, Ms. Lynch, and our class advisors, we put on a fantastic show. Although SRO required a lot of time and work, it all paid off in the end. I made new friendships, I learned about my classmates' secret talents, and I had a lot of fun. My only hope for the class of 2019 is bigger and better. Thank you.
Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, members of the board. I'm very sad to say that tonight will be my last Board of Ed speech before I get to introduce the amazing new leaders of Greenwich High School. Elections are on Monday. I would like to take this time to reflect on my past 2 years in student government and my time in this district. Last month, I had written a welcome letter to the incoming freshmen. It had given me a time to reflect and give the best advice I could, as if I could go back in time and say the same words to myself. As I had gone back and forth of what I can say that would actually be beneficial from an 18-year-old kid, it became clear to me that there was one simple message to succeed at GHS in our community: to get involved. I was a kid that started high school the same way many others do. Not an athlete, not a thespian, not an artist, well, just a kid that liked to hang out with my friends. While this was all great, my life had changed forever the day somebody had given me that little nudge and said, "I think you would make a good class president." I had thought to myself, if I don't run, then I can't lose. But if I do run, then I can be set up to fail. However, it took that nudge, that risk to fail, to sign my name on the application, and from then on, my life was changed. So I'm telling you this story because there's a point in all of it. As a district, we must support and encourage our youth to get involved. There has been a change in America this year. If the adults won't start change, we will. While I'm confident that the youth have the power to do this themselves, I can assure you that the path will be paved much easier if the adults support us. This means that when kids rise up, we do not bash them with negative headlines. This means that we encourage kids to get involved with adult topics. This means that as a board and administration, that we do not look at what is the logistically easier solution, but what will give each and every student that just one little nudge. I had focused my time in this position on how students can reach out to our community and make a difference. With this, there were some very positive and few negative impacts. However, what I have learned is that while it may be easier to point fingers and criticize, just a little more energy could be spent on respectful and common sense solutions. This district has some very exciting topics to address in the near future, so I ask that the student voice is not only heard with each and every discussion, but the primary factor when decisions are made. Serving in this position has been an experience and an honor that I am so incredibly grateful for. However, while I may be the one up here that stands and moves my mouth a lot, I must give gratitude where it's due. First, Dr. Winters and Ms. Lynch, who give their heart and soul every minute of every day to Greenwich High School. The board and Dr. Gilday, who always have their minds and their ears open to what students have to say. Elisa and all my executive committee who put in this amazing effort to achieve what we have achieved. And last but not least, my parents, my family, and my friends who motivate me every day to, as my dad would say, keep punching. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the night.
You two are still on the hook for the next meeting, so don't forget to come back. We need you. Thank you. Next up will be the GEA comments. Ms. Sutton.
Greg.
I don't usually read off my screen, but my computer knows it's nearing the end of the year and kind of wouldn't print. So good evening, Mr. Grasso, Chairman Bernstein, board members, Dr. Gilday, members of the cabinet, and members of the community. I'm Carol Sutton, and I'm honored to represent over 900 members of the Greenwich Education Association. What an amazing set of recognitions we had this evening. We are definitely doing something right in the Greenwich Public Schools. So at this time of year, and I'll take myself as an example, we're all a little bit frazzled. Our sense of accomplishment is tempered by second-guessing what we haven't accomplished. Our feeling and looking forward to the summer is sort of clouded when we think of the retiring teachers and colleagues and students to whom we have to say goodbye. And on top of everything, GEA is moving our office after almost 25 years in the same place. So as anyone who's ever moved after a long time, you know that that's incredibly stressful, and you can find some really cool artifacts. So I found one that I thought that I'm definitely keeping. There's been a lot of shredding going on, but back in the day, somebody's responsibility was to clip things. And this one is called News, 1976, and it's very yellow. But you may remember, or not, that 1976, before the advent of collective bargaining, was or binding arbitration, I should say, was the time of strikes. And I was a junior in high school, and when the radio said, "No school today again," because of the strike in Norwalk, I was happy. I went to the beach, or I'm not going to say what we did, but it was the 70s. Anyway, but this was pretty intense, and I went through this. And if anyone wants to see it during the meeting, you can tap me on the shoulder. But like back in the day before Facebook, there used to be, unions would take out full-page advertisements, asking the community for support, and even the paper was bigger then. Look how big this is. Anyway, sadly, we're also finding files and files and files that unfortunately demonstrate that in many areas not much has changed. Very sobering, very sobering. So anyway, so here we are. At our last meeting, if you recall, it was all about this year's distinguished teachers and the celebration of all that's good about being a teacher in this district in a place that's supportive and forward-thinking for all teaching and learning. In fact, on most days, Greenwich teachers arrive to school joyful and energized, ready to mold the next generation. And that's what I talked about last time. But it is also a fact that on some days, some Greenwich teachers come to school wondering if they will be punched, scratched, or head-butted by a student, hit with a chair or another thrown object, or whether they will have to use the walkie to request backup, or have to evacuate their classroom. Again. In districts all over the state, yes, including Greenwich, extreme student behavior like this is pervasive and increasing. And please don't try to guess what schools it's in, because you will be surprised. And this behavior is beginning in our earliest grades and often among regular education students. Teachers who are already operating at maximum capacity to deliver the curriculum that is required here to the standards that are required are looking for support from their colleagues, their building administrators, and their union. Building administrators are doing whatever they can, and they're finding their hands tied by budget constraints. It's not enough money. By space limitations, where are we going to put them? By the head count edict, and we all know about that, and yes, even by statute. But that's going to change as of September 1st, 2019, which is right around the corner. During this past legislative session in Hartford, a session that didn't get very much accomplished, but it did pass a few things, including bump stock bans. A bill was introduced in the Senate. It was called SB 453, an act concerning classroom safety and disruptive behavior. Doesn't really chip off the tongue. The bill passed both houses and is now awaiting the governor's signature. Among other provisions, the bill will allow physically aggressive students to be removed from the classroom for their safety, for the teacher's safety, for the rest of the class's safety, and require that they receive appropriate supports and resources before returning to the classroom. So I ask you, now that the 2018-19 budget has passed, it'll be important for the board and the administration to plan for what appropriate supports and resources will look like in Greenwich. We have some ideas, starting with not trying to do the best we can with what we have. This is what we're doing now, and examples abound if you ask around. Instead, we ask you to seriously consider a new program of intensive behavior intervention by highly trained personnel in an alternate setting. Maybe the Greenwich Public Schools can use part of an underutilized building to create a true therapeutic clinical program for kids who need it as a precursor or as a substitute for education in a neighborhood school. Let's hire true professionals who are specifically trained to work with extreme behaviors. Let's open it to surrounding districts. Hey, it could be a money maker. That's just one idea we have about how to prepare Greenwich for when an act concerning classroom safety and disruptive behavior goes into effect in a little over a year. At the last work session of the board, Mary Ford said, in answer to a question about special education teachers, she said, "We'll get those teachers the support they need." And she's not going to be able to do that without you. And we hope that she'll be able to, because our students and teachers deserve it. Thank you.
Thank next up are comments from PTA Council. Mrs. Rick.
Good evening, Dr. Gilday, Chairman Bernstein, Principal Grasso, members of the board, cabinet, and community. I'm Karen Hirsch, President of Greenwich PTA Council. We'd like to thank Hamilton Avenue School for hosting tonight and congratulate all of the exceptional award winners here this evening. Much like the awards given out earlier, tonight's agenda covers a wide range of many important topics and areas that affect our students, parents, educators, and cover the gamut from academic to social, emotional, and student wellness. In addition to advocating for our children's academic education, it is the PTA Council's mission to support the health and welfare of our students at home, in schools, and in the community at large. We are aware of the benefits a later morning bell time can provide for our students and are also cognizant of the many issues that have emerged or been highlighted by bell time changes. Now our challenge as a district is to understand how that change has impacted academics, sleep, stress, extracurricular activities, and family life, and work to mitigate the issues that have emerged. At the same time the board is reviewing school bell times, it's also being asked to approve many revised CABE policies. And perhaps fittingly, one such policy states that the board recognizes that the purpose of family life education is to help students acquire factual knowledge, attitudes, and values which will contribute to the well-being of the individual, family, and society. To provide instruction directed towards enabling students to effectively discuss problems and have the willingness and ability to listen, accept criticism, and respond with openness, frankness, and honesty, thus demonstrating a mutual respect for others and their views. While this policy is written to address a specific topic, it is a policy and an attitude that we, as a district, should be modeling and asking of ourselves and our students in every area. Council echoes Dr. Winter's request for the community to engage in a respectful dialogue and also believes that good policy design includes regular reviews, being comprehensive and objective, and looking at numerous data points to inform decision. In fact, one of the policies being discussed tonight is the evaluation of instructional programs. We must work together, be flexible, and find solutions that will bring the greatest good to the greatest number while still safeguarding the interests of all. And though Council's disappointed that tonight's final SST 2017-2018 update from WSTAT does not seem to contain any new data or details, nor does it discuss how bell time changes have impacted elementary or middle school families, we are looking forward to hearing the board's discussion and any recommendations from the superintendent on ways to maximize the benefits of bell time changes, while also rectifying some of the issues that have arisen along the way. While the change to a later start time was not made with a focus on improving academics, student health is most definitely a factor in their achievement, as are other factors such as stress, homework, and grading policies, topics which are also part of tonight's CABE policy review. In fact, another CABE policy in tonight's packet states that the board recognizes that health and student success in school are interrelated, and that schools cannot achieve their primary mission of education if students and staff are not healthy and fit physically, mentally, and socially. Bell time change has been an important topic of discussion and a major undertaking for Greenwich Public Schools, and has helped highlight other areas of concern in our district, but it has also unintentionally taken discussion away from other important areas of need. While the report does not provide an overview of the impact bell changes have had on athletics, while it does provide an overview, on athletics, extracurricular activities, and academics, it seems we're still not focusing on other factors that affect student health. As you focus on the school start time update and the policy reviews tonight, please look at the whole picture, the whole system. We urge you not to solely focus on the immediate short-term areas of concern, but to continue to address other areas of student needs, such as student stress, personalized learning, both as it pertains to the district's strategic plan and as an avenue to find ways to close the academic achievement gaps that are still persistent in our district. A review of the district's homework policy, assessment systems, student data portals, and of our digital devices, as our lease period will soon be ending. And to continue to find ways to increase parent involvement. Again, all topics included as part of tonight's approval of new CABE policies. Council reminds you that whatever stressors bell time changes have highlighted, it's imperative that we continue to look to find solutions to fix each of these issues independently. As a district, and consultants working on behalf of the district continue to provide program and service reviews and updates, Council would like to remind you of the importance of presenting information to the community in a thoughtful manner. It should come as no surprise that with no context or background, the public may react strongly to some discussions, take it upon themselves to fill in information gaps, or take the discourse down unintended paths. PTAC encourages the district to take command of the narrative, much as you are doing by hosting the Community Forum on Greenwich Public Schools Facilities Master Plan and the Cardinal Field Improvement Project next Tuesday evening. And in closing, we would like to urge people to attend the Board of Education's Community Forum to learn more about the need for improvements at all school facilities. The community is being given an amazing opportunity to provide valuable input to the board, so that our facilities are not only state-of-the-art, but also provide our students and staff a safe and healthy environment in which to learn. It's just one more way for our community to help address the overall well-being of our students. Thank you.
All right, next up is community comments. We've got a number of speakers signed up, and I presume there's others who will want to speak. We'll get to you once we can go through the list. The first speaker is Elizabeth DeHaven. And the speaker after that will be, I believe it's Scott Mitchell.
Good evening, Chairman Bernstein, Dr. Gilday, Board of Education members, cabinet members, and the community. I am Elizabeth DeHaven, and this is Audra O'Donovan. We are both PTAC Educational Differences Support Committee co-chairs, as well as very proud moms of children at North Mianus School. In this position, we have had the opportunity to hear many parents' stories of their and their children's experience in special education. Some have been positive, but many have been filled with frustration, hurt, and exasperation. These feelings are not unique to Greenwich, but no parent here or elsewhere should have to feel like they are letting their child down because their school district is not trying everything in the available toolbox to help them succeed. That said, there was a moment 2 weeks ago when we and other members of the community were flooded with hope. In the midst of the discussion of the Special Education Monitoring Report, Mr. Schur reminded everyone that part of the mission of the Greenwich Public Schools is to enable students to reach and expand their potential. Yes, for each child to reach their potential, even if they receive special education services. That takes training for all teachers so they can understand the specific needs of each student. It takes high expectations, ambitiously appropriate IEP goals. It takes accountability and objectivity. And it takes a willingness to be innovative, like joining up with other districts to serve a specific population or creating an opt-in specialized program. We are here tonight to thank the board and thank Mary for continuing the conversation and to urge you to not let the approval of this monitoring report be the last we hear about special education services in Greenwich until the next report. Greenwich could be a model of what it truly means to help all students reach their potential. This will take time and a plan, but parents will stand behind you. As discussed in the last meeting, we and the EDS committee hope that the board discusses the merits of a full program evaluation that focuses not just on compliance, but how the program aligns with the mission to enable students to reach their potential. A review that has explicit goals and measurables, ways in which to include parents and teachers,
30 seconds,
and ultimately influences the strategic plan for special education in the Greenwich Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Scott Mitchell, followed by Maria Bonham.
Good evening all, and thank you for allowing me to speak. My name is Scott Mitchell. Start times is my subject matter. Several thoughts, not in any particular order. Bedtime's later in our neighborhood. It's later at our house. It's my job as a parent to encourage a healthy lifestyle to my kids. That's my job. after-school sports presents a lot of issues. I have a sophomore who runs cross-country and indoor track. We don't have indoor track, so they run outdoor. And I have an 8th grader. Missing 1 to 2 classes a week for meets, you can't make those classes up. Pitch black outdoor exercise between 3 and 7 in the winter months is just dangerous. I run, I would never do it. They run downtown Greenwich, unacceptable. The lighting on our fields, which is not a Board of Ed issue, just constrains our evening games and practices. I don't see that getting solved. We're constrained by it. We spend $1 million a year on bus expenses. Holy cow. I mean, that could get a year. That could get spent on, I don't even want to opine on where else that could get spent. Teachers that have kids in other towns have a difficult time in the morning and the afternoon, especially if they have kids in those schools, showing up on time early, being there for our kids early, being there late. It just seems in retrospect that a lot of the downsides, until we got into it, I don't want to say that they weren't thought about because they were discussed, but being into it, they're real. You know, all leaders can make errors and make them at work all the time, but let's learn from them and not just because we voted on something, not say, hey, maybe we should go back to how it was. Our town's been producing thousands of students a year for decades, great kids that are healthy, happy, and wonderfully productive members of our communities. I was very happy to see Dr. Winter's article in the paper yesterday or the day before, and I agree with the direction he's going. I say, why not just go back to where it was? Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Maria Warner, followed by Kathleen Feinstein. Maria? All right, she may have left. Kathleen Feinstein, followed by Sarah Zegan.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen Feinstein, and I'm coming here tonight as a parent of a current 11th grader and an 8th grader. And I have a very recent graduate from Greenwich Public Schools. And I'm here tonight to implore you to take a common sense approach to the issues we have with school end time. Common sense tells us that what works for some doesn't work for all. We have some clear data that says that our children are missing some significant class time. Common sense tells us that less class time can't be a good solution. I therefore implore you to follow common sense and work to mitigate the losses of class time with a compromise. How can we expect our students to excel when we are giving them so much less? I really hope that you will listen and trust Dr. Winters and the other educational professionals who know and understand our entire student body best and have their best interests at heart. It is literally their job to provide what's best for our children. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Sarah Zegan, followed by Katie Yu. Just a reminder, speakers each have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Grasso, Chairman Bernstein, and Board of Education members, Superintendent Gilday, members of the Cabinet, and members of the community. My name is Sarah Zegan. I'm a resident of Greenwich, a parent of children at the International School at Dundee, Eastern Middle School, and Greenwich High School, and a physics teacher at Greenwich High School. After reading the letter to the editor that Dr. Winters submitted to the local newspapers, I felt compelled to speak on the topic of school start time change. I have paid close attention to the discussions and implementation of the change in school start time for our middle and high schools this year. I have read numerous articles with respect to the science involved promoting a later start time. I have researched schools where the change in start time has been made, and I have read numerous posts on social media, both for and against the change here in Greenwich. Most of the people who support or do not support the change in school start time are individuals who are concerned with their own family situation and their own children's schedules and sleep habits. This past Monday, Dr. Winters wrote a letter to the editor outlining a sensible solution to some of the negative effects the school start time change has created, and I believe his solution should be taken seriously and implemented. Unlike most stakeholders in this process, Dr. Winters is observing and managing with start time change on a daily basis. Dr. Winters does not have children in our public schools who want to sleep in or play fall sports. He is an objective individual who wants a solution to the problems that affect the 2,680 students and 300 staff members every day at Greenwich High School. The community, members of the Board of Education, and Superintendent should trust and value his opinion, as his job and goal is to provide a safe and effective learning environment for all students. A lot of thought and compromise went into Dr. Winters' recommendation of an 8:15 a.m. start time with a dismissal of 2:45 p.m. Because this solution has been presented by the person responsible for the day-to-day operation of Greenwich High School, it should carry a lot of weight. I humbly request that the Board of Education and Superintendent respect his recommendation and make this change for the 2018-2019 school year. I hope that the Board of Education and community can work together with Dr. Winters and recognize that his solution is not to return to the previous bell times. He has found a resolution which will alleviate many of the problems that have arisen at GHS due to the school start time change, while maintaining a school day whose length remains well within the state of Connecticut guidelines. Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Katie Yu, followed by Emily Hosman.
Good evening. Chairman Bernstein, members of the board, Dr. Gilday, cabinet, and members of the community. Tonight I am joined with my colleague and ISD Eastern Middle School parent Scott Griffith to express our concern about the proposed elimination of some wording on page 33 under grouping policy number 6152 as part of the CABE policy overhaul. Please note that we are not speaking in our official capacities tonight, but as concerned parents. We are curious about the new wording, which does not appear to include the phrases "in a deeper and complex manner" and "at an accelerated pace." We wonder if all constituents have been surveyed about these proposed changes. Targeted curriculum does not, in our opinion, encompass these two very important tenets of advanced learners. Overall, we agree and support the earlier bullets discussing the value in having students whose skills and interests that are varied grouped together to promote conversation and support for one another. However, it is stated earlier that it is also the policy of the Board of Ed that the grouping and placement of students be based exclusively on educational considerations, and that the primary goal is to promote the best educational interests of each student. The policy also notes that the placement of students in instructional groups, classrooms, or programs of study has a significant impact on their educational and social development. We respectfully ask that all constituents be brought into the conversation before making such a change, which on its surface could have significant implications on a program that has served our district well throughout the years and is one of the cornerstones and enviable assets within our district. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. The next speaker is Emily Hosson, followed by Susan Fahey.
Hi, thank you all for allowing me the opportunity to speak tonight and for your service to the town of Greenwich. My name is Emily Hazen, and my husband and I have 4 children in the Greenwich Public Schools, and I'm speaking tonight regarding special education. Our 7-year-old son Oscar has autism, and when he was diagnosed, professionals told us he may never talk or read. Fast forward 5 years, and through the incredible efforts of GPS staff members like Kim Pearson, Louise Williamson, Denise Lotko, Anna Deutmeyer, to name a few, our sweet boy isn't just talking, he's reading, writing, and thriving. I mention these women at Old Greenwich because every day I'm thankful that they came into our lives, and they deserve the public recognition for their hard work. And while I want to believe that our experience is the norm for every student and every parent in their child's academic career in GPS, I know that this isn't always the case. It's been expressed in the past that the special education community isn't a vocal one, but I'm sure you all can imagine the difficulty of putting your child's disability in the spotlight. And while I'm sure my kids would wish I wasn't so vocal, they've come to accept that's just what I do. So tonight I'm here as a voice for the voiceless and a representative of all those who need their special education children to be held to high expectations with excellent instruction and innovative practices. I am here because all children need to reach and expand their potential, and the conversation of how to do this for special ed students needs to continue and flourish. And because a lot of us worked hard to get grandmothers and spouses coordinated on schedules, if you're here tonight for special education, could you raise your hand? Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Susan Fahey, followed by Jim Ray.
Barbara, don't start it too early. Don't start it too early. Distract her again, Dayton. Hi, I'm Susan Fahey. I'm here tonight to talk about later school start time. We are in the very predictable position of discussing and hearing argument on later school start time because, as predicted, we did not fully flush out what the overall effects would be for the new cause. We did not want to listen to all the stakeholders, including the administration and the students. We just wanted the end game so badly, we moved forward. And now the bullying about future votes and threats about students, we have to continue to be thrown against our Board of Ed and superintendent schools. This is not how we should behave as humans to one another, threatening their voter base and the way our Board of Ed and superintendent are thought of in our community. It is just shameful. I feel bad for the Board of Ed and our superintendent. You see, I heard loud and clear when you wanted an 8:30 start time. I heard that the #1 job of the Board of Ed is health and the well-being of our students, and #2 is education. But see, we are failing many of our students again and make it difficult to have positive achievement and benefits for all of our students by threatening the Board of Ed and by not allowing pragmatic minor adjustments necessary to maintain as much of the later school's time as possible, and that would benefit the greatest amount of our students. The new mantra seems to be the vision of the graduate as a well-slept child, and not equal education of all of our students, and not mental health considerations for all either. While there were many children, so experts said, that would have mental health benefits from later school start time, we now have a large group of students who have gained anxiety and stress disorders with a compression at the end of the day. A new group who are now seeking professional help. Is the Board of Ed willing to pick one pool of at-risk students for another? I would hope not. I would hope that we would look at this like responsible elected adults and do what is good for the greater good of all of our students. Moving the clock 15 minutes while taking 3 minutes away from non-lunch block classes seems to be a reasonable way to get kids sleep as much as possible while taking away some of the compression at the end of the day. This is for the kids who dance, work, theater, volunteer, clubs, and sports, basically anything besides going home and just doing homework. Additionally, it's irresponsible for the burden of later school start time initiative to fall harder on the back of our student athletes and negatively impact their education, time, and grades. I'm not talking lights, I'm talking allowing them to miss many more classes with early dismissal for sports and to support later school start time. Are we waiting for a new group of parents to sue us for allowing truancy and for excused absences? And while we've all agreed on the science, I think we can say that science and implementation is not the same. I spoke last month about breastfeeding and recommendations between the CDC and American Academy of Pediatrics, so I don't need to talk about the American Heart Association and their allowance for adult beverages. So students and our own data are suggesting that what is working is not, what we are doing now is not being implemented well. 40% of our population is saying that they are more stressed than last year. That is a big number. A lot of students this year in the junior class are opting for no electives and no language classes next year in order to offset the compression at the end of the day, giving them more blocks open. This is a sad day for those of us who care about the Board of Ed.
Time.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker is Jim Healy, followed by William Goodman. After that, that's the end of the speakers that have signed up. If you wish to address the board, I'm going to ask you to line up over there on the side, and we will take you in the order you're lined up. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jim Healy. I had a son graduate in Greenwich High, and I have another son who's a sophomore. And thank you for hearing me out tonight. I really didn't intend to speak tonight, but I thought I read Dr. Winter's article, and I just wanted to put a couple things into perspective. And I should say at the outset, I have the utmost respect for Dr. Winters. The 8:30, I just want to provide some context on the 8:30 start time. I've gotten to know the lead authors of the American Academy of Pediatrics paper recommendation, as well as leading experts at places like Stanford, Harvard, and Yale. And when I asked them about it, I asked them, can we move to 8:30? How bad would it be? What came back to me was, Jim, you got to understand, the optimal time is 9:30 or 10, depending on the school district and the transportation realities. So in the interest of coming to a proposal that was potentially doable, they've already compromised as far as medically they think they can. To go further than that, and they went the earliest they could in the hopes that schools like Greenwich would adopt it. But to go further with that, in the words of Judy Dillons, is to do harm. So if you look at this, imagine we were talking about minimum academic standards. And we were saying, well, let's just compromise a little bit on minimum academic standards. 8:30 is the earliest time that the medical establishment says we should start school. If you had if you were to then say, well, we got minimum academic, but why can't we compromise it? You know, it's 15 minutes or in start time, but maybe it's a course or something that we can compromise in terms of minimum academic standards. You wouldn't consider that for a second. The sleep this isn't like cutting 15 inches off a stick. This is more like interrupting a cycle. Now, you don't interrupt a washing machine cycle. And it's an apt example, because what happens in sleep is that cycles, and each cycle has several stages. Well, the longest and the most restorative cycle is the REM cycle that happens just before you wake. And that is the time in which new learning is consolidated and integrated with existing learning. And as policymakers, although it's alluring to say it's only 15 minutes, you are cutting off perhaps the most precious minutes of the day. What I would argue is that, and I like the idea, and I completely understand and sympathize with the shortened day. What I would propose is leave 8:30 alone, go to 2:45. You got 15 minutes, Dr. Winters provided how you could get it, and extend the school year 2 or 3 days. The summer, that's long summer is an anachronism from the time that you needed kids to harvest the crops. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. The last speaker that signed up is William Goodman, and then if you do wish to speak, I'd ask again that you stand on the side so that we're not waiting for you. Thank you.
Dr. Gilday, members of the Board of Education, thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. To introduce myself, I'm William Goodman. I'm a senior at Greenwich High School. And given that we've had so many parents speaking on the issue of student start time, their school start time, I thought it might be beneficial to hear from a student. So tonight I want to talk about 3 things. I found a few locations. Student opinion, traffic, and 15 minutes of sleep and what that means. So to start, by talking about my observations of students, when I walk into school in the morning, there's a difference from last year. People are happier, people are healthier, people are more vibrant, more extroverted, people are more talkative. Gone are the days of hordes of students trudging in like zombies with large jugs of coffee in hand, thank God. And though the first period test is still a struggle, it's less difficult than it was last year. And when students and people in general really don't like something, they often speak their mind about it, they often complain about it. And in September, when school start time initially was changed, yes, there were students complaining, but over the past few months, some changes have occurred. Either A, students have grown to like the school start time because I hear much less complaining, or B, students have learned to adapt to it, to work with it. Talk about being tough. I have friends who are rugby players, who do crew, who do football, I myself do tennis, and even amidst applying to college, despite a rigorous academic schedule, despite playing very time-intensive sports, we still manage to get to bed on time, and we still manage to wake up in the morning looking healthy and looking happy. And so, this feels normal, the new school day. This is right, it feels right. And so that's one reason why I think we shouldn't move back in any shape or form. To talk about traffic, the difference from last year is marginal, maybe a 5-minute difference at most. I live by Riverside train station. It takes me 15 minutes to get to school in the morning. Woke up at 8:10 this morning, or left at 8:10. Got to my parking space at 8:25. Same for the afternoon. I've gotten home in 10 minutes or less. There's really no traffic problem. And finally, to talk about 15 minutes of sleep. Sometimes when I wake up in the morning and my alarm goes off, I feel tired. And so I set my alarm back 15 minutes, and suddenly, when I wake up, I have more energy. This is not a single time thing. This happens repeatedly. And there are snooze buttons on alarms for a reason, right? People want to delay the alarm 8 to 10 minutes because that 8 to 10 minutes feels good. It feels like a good amount of sleep. The American Academy of Pediatrics recommends an 8:30 start time. Moving the start time back to 8:15 would be a failure, not a compromise.
30
because
seconds.
science doesn't compromise, and nor should we compromise on the health of our students. This is a time for Greenwich to show strength, to show that we embrace science and the future. If not Greenwich, then who? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if you wouldn't mind stating your name when you come on up. We got you, thank you. And you're done, right? You're done school, you're finished? Nice.
Good evening. My name is Glenn Canner. I appreciate being able to take a couple of moments. This is very spontaneous. I did not anticipate speaking this evening. My son graduated Greenwich High School 15 years ago, but he had a very positive experience, and I've kind of been following this school start time, and I am encouraging the Board of Ed and the administration to continue working to try to find the right balance for our students. I wasn't planning to speak, but it was suggested that I come and share a couple of thoughts. One is, when my son was at the high school, he played 3 sports for 4 straight years, and he had a very positive experience, and that made him who he is today on the West Coast. He is a college and high school professor, teacher, and coach. He deals with top students, top athletes, and I can tell you on the West Coast, they're all very, very busy, working very hard to build up that resume and compete for the same college spots that our kids are. And so I have been reading that the later start time has caused problems with some of these things that are very important to young people, sports, music, and I would ask that you not sell our young people short. Second of all, for several years, he coached water polo at Claremont McKenna College. He had athletes on his team that had perfect SAT scores, top students, but nevertheless, the thing that got them out of bed, the most important thing, was to be the top D3 water polo team in the country. This is what motivates our kids. This is very, very important, whether it be sports or music or whatever. And academics is very important, but I can just tell, my son's been doing this now for 10 or 15 years, to young people, these extracurricular activities are very, very important. And then the final thing, I guess I was reading recently in the past couple days, there were some declarations that science says that the school start time has to be such, and with all due respect to the prior speakers, in my day job, I am a trial lawyer, and I hire scientists, experts to support my case. And not to be cynical,
30
but
seconds.
For the right amount of money, a scientist will say whatever you want. So science is nuanced. There's not black and white. And I think when I read, I just did some research, and I saw that the town of Newtown they were lucky enough to have a Yukon Health sleep disorder doctor help them with their late start time, and ultimately they settled at an 8 o'clock start time, which is a half hour later. I would ask you to consider that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And again, if you wouldn't mind stating your name, if there's anybody else that would like to speak, I'd ask that you come up to the side just so we can keep this moving. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Karen Giannuzzi, and I'm just here as a concerned citizen as well about the school start times. Just like the previous speaker, I had a daughter who graduated Greenwich High School. She played 3 varsity sports, so I get the whole sport thing. She had early start times and she did quite well, but I understand that there are some families, that are really benefiting from the later start time. And assuming that the science is all correct, and that these families are all really happy, I think that's wonderful. The problem is that the later school start time has caused other problems, unintended problems, and there's other kids and families that are suffering and creating additional stresses because of their sports schedule, their activity schedule, and whatever. And I feel like there's these 2 competing groups that are trying to say what is best for our children. And I was happy to see Dr. Winter's editorial in the paper, because I felt he's trying to take a common sense approach to try to deal with these 2 different groups. And I would just encourage the board and the community to try to come together and find a way to make the most people happy. I know you're not going to make everybody happy, but
to the extent you can come up with a compromise and find a way to deal with it, I think that is what would be most beneficial for our children. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right. If there's anybody else, please do line up on the side.
I'll be quick. I'm Amy Bedini. I just wanted to make one point. I was talking to a friend of mine today about this issue, and she said, actually, 3:15 is late. When you look at our private schools in town, they're getting out at 3:25, sometimes 3:30, and they have, a lot of them have their athletics that are built into the system. They don't have physical education. So they travel up to Choate and Wallingford, they travel up to Hopkins and New Haven. They travel also, yet those parents aren't complaining about the travel for their athletes. They're still sending their kids there and they're paying for them to go there. So I just wanted to sort of bring some perspective as to what's late and what's not late. I had a son who missed a lot of Fridays and Thursdays throughout his career, and he even accelerated and graduated early, so essentially missed his whole senior year, and he's now skating hockey at Harvard, and I think he's doing okay. So I do support athletes, and I do support, you know, the other, but the sleep is very, very important, and I don't want to see any kind of change. I agree with Jim Healy's comments about we wouldn't sacrifice if it was some other kind of initiative that you're working on. But I just want to bring some perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, if there's anybody else that would like to address an agenda or non-agenda item, again, please stand to the side.
Hi, my name's Dan Abbasi. For once, I'm going to be very brief tonight. I sat through the 4 hours of the steering committee, the 2 sessions, and I just want to acknowledge Dr. Gilday's leadership. What I witnessed was leadership there. You know, she laid out basically 8:30 as a working constraint and really did what she could to summon the creativity of everyone in that room to come up with creative options for all the other moving parts we have, to work with those and to come to a solution for the legitimate implementation concerns that have been raised. And I just want to take a moment. She's walked into a challenging year where the community is still trying to work through the historic decision that a number of you on the board took last year in putting us at this 8:30 minimum required start time. And I appreciate her leadership, and I think she deserves our continued appreciation as we work through the remainder of this effort. Thank you.
Hi, Claire Kilgallen. I just pulled up something off my iPad that I spoke about to the committee in November of 2015 when we had community forums about start times and the different options being offered. And I'll just read it in part. Problematic issues. Many parents do not work locally and do not have the luxury of nannies, au pairs to transport their children to school or have access to buses. A later dismissal detrimentally impacts after-school activities, religious education, and enrichment programs, time to do homework, eat dinner, have family time, and get to bed at an age-appropriate hour. So logistic issues were raised. It's unfortunate that the process led to encountering the issues, you know, as the change took place. And I think there's no harm in doing what Dr. Gilday is doing. Proper project management includes planning for contingencies, reviewing how the plan is going, and adjusting if necessary. That's just logical, good planning. I thank Dr. Gilday, I thank the board for being brave enough to look at the issues and to review, revisit, and if needed, make incremental changes. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other speakers, we will go ahead and close the community comments. Going once, going twice. All right, thank you very much, everybody. It is an important part of what we do is to hear from the public. We appreciate the thoughtfulness of the comments. All right, the next item on the agenda is the monthly reports, and we will start with the superintendent's report. Look at that.
Perfect timing. All right, so first of all, I have to tell you, I'm going to miss those kids. Those seniors who have presented every month, I'm going to miss those kids. They have been amazing student leaders, and I've loved working with them. Next, the Innovation Lab exhibition, outstanding. To see the work that happens and comes out of the high school is quite incredible. Middle schools are also doing some exhibitions of their work through their capstone projects. And what's been really funny, or maybe not because board members get a lot of emails, but all of a sudden these emails are showing up kind of randomly in the board members and my mailboxes that say, you know, we really need to make sure we have pad dispensers in the bathrooms. Or what are some of the other ones? They've been really funny. And you know, I'm calling the principal saying, we're getting lots of student queries. And they said, oh, we're really working with the kids to call for action. And they feel like they should go straight to the top, right to the board and you. So I'm hearing about all the things I didn't know about all years. That's been kind of fun. I do want to thank everyone that has assisted with the development and support of the budget. It was very exciting to know that BET and RTM passed the school district budget for 18-19, so that's affirming. I did want to apologize for having to reschedule the arts events and concerts, but due to that weather that came through, we did not feel it would be best to have people out and about. So thank you for your flexibility in adjusting those, but unfortunately I think some of the adjustments might intersect with our master facility plan presentation. However, that will be taped and we will have the ability to put input online. Sorry, kind of funny sound here on the mic. During that storm event, we did have some very minor water infiltration into the ceiling of MISA, into the lobby area. One little garbage can covered, caught some drops. And we did have some brief power loss with a backup generator over at Eastern Middle School. But otherwise, knock on wood, all good, other than some trees that were down. I do want to encourage the public to please participate in the 15-year master facility plan. This provides for future focused facility input, which is really exciting. And finally, I'd like to let everybody know I do appreciate the collaborative efforts of the collective community to help solve for challenges we face, be that our student discipline, our policy work, and the updates that we're adopting, our special ed program, our facility needs, our budget, and start time, which we'll hear more about later tonight. Thank you.
All right, with that,
It's weird, it just sounds loud.
good reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. Mr. Sheriff.
Jill, I've been told, I don't know this is true, but I've been told by children who are in MISA right now preparing for the show that the leaks are maybe a little bit more extensive. So they apparently, someone said, the kids seem to kind of suck this up. Like, apparently it's been there for a while, but they don't, then parents become aware of it. So anyway, I understand, I have no idea this is true. Skylights, I didn't even know we had skylights in that building. Okay, they've been apparently leaking for a while, according to a custodian. It's not a most recent, just the storm. I understand in the last report they were talking about the orchestra pit leaking. Apparently some people are saying there are other rooms, particularly either practice rooms or green rooms, where there are leaks. So I was wondering, as part of your report, if we could get a more comprehensive understanding of that, and then maybe, I don't even know if the building committee, Lauren, I know you were on that representing us. I'd like to understand, given that the building's so new, if these things are actually occurring, to what degree our warranty with our contractors are or are not applying. So I know you brought it up in the report about the leak, and this is kind of the second time. I was wondering if you could send something to us in writing that's a little bit more detailed to separate fact from fiction.
Sure, Lori grabbed a note on that, and we can send you the latest information we have from Dan Watson. We actually get pictures if there's something. It looked very minor to me, but of course I wasn't looking in the back practice rooms. So we'll definitely have them check that out. Thanks.
All right, with that, we'll go to reports of officers, committees, and liaisons. We can start at this end. Dr. Francis, do you have any report? Ms. O'Neill? No? Anybody done at this end? Lauren? Ms. Wilson. I'm sorry.
This is on, yeah. The Curriculum Council met on May 7th, and we are sending a survey to all the teachers before to look at the online textbooks, the online books that we're using for the math program to get teacher input before we renew. And we will meet again on June 4th, pardon.
Any other reports? Oh, a question from Ms. O'Neill, I think, for Ms. Olson.
Ms. Olson, is there going to be parent input into the selection of the text, or is it just teacher input?
At this point, it's just teacher input to see what they're using, what they prefer, and what they use most to make sure that going forward, we're not buying something and renewing something if it's not actually what we're using most. So just get teacher input at this point.
Ms. Raven.
Sorry.
You're up.
So to answer Peter Scher's question, so yeah, the building committee is working with Dan, still alive. We don't have a CO yet, so the items that are still under warranty, working with the appropriate contractors, a subset of the building committee, and we're all sort of apprised to that. So thanks to everybody for getting the budget approved, especially Lori, your hard work in year one. So we are looking to schedule our next budget subcommittee because we're ready to start to think about the proposals for how the budget book will look like for the next fiscal year. So I just sent an email to the rest of the budget committee about a date.
Ms. Dayton.
Boards of Education had a very successful year in the legislature. Despite it being a short session, we restored funding for the TEAM program, a teacher mentoring program that's essential for new teachers joining our district. We restored ECS funding. We increased it as well from the original proposal. In addition to that, Boards of Education advocated that they should be allowed to hold back money without returning it to the town in an increased percent. We were under state law allowed to hold back 1%. Now we're allowed to hold back 2% without returning it to the town if we so choose. I think that that could become useful in special education, and since that was a topic, I hope that provides flexibility to us. Really good news overall for Boards of Education: no teacher pensions, ECS, following a formula, fair basis for making decisions on funding. So onward and upward, hope for the future to have even more revenue to share among the districts.
Thank you. I've got a couple of quick reports. This one never gets old. New Lebanon Building Committee, I want to announce that we're on time and on budget. We have submitted our next reimbursement to the state, and just like everything else in the state, their system is broken. So we're going to pursue that quickly and fast. Cardinal Stadium Committee met today. Really do want to encourage people to come out next Tuesday for the forum on the stadium. The first hour is basically earmarked for the stadium, the rest for the master facilities plan. People who can't attend, there is a link in the notice that's been going out from the district, as well as on the page for the master plan. Please do encourage people to go ahead and give us feedback. This is a town-wide effort. It's a long-range effort. The stadium is a shorter run. The buildings are not. That's something we really need to be getting input on. Last, this is for the board. I sent you a board self-evaluation 2+ weeks ago. I would encourage you to complete that. The idea is to bring those results together and present them at our work session. So please do complete that. We want the due date, I believe, is tomorrow or Monday. So I'll remind you again over the weekend if I don't hear from you. No extensions. And Ms. Sutton, I feel real bad about your printer, but about your computer, but a lot of teachers still require things to be printed and handed in. So there you go. And I didn't get my GEA t-shirt like Aaron did over there. All right, with that, we will close that down and move on to number 7, which is action items. The first item is policies, the CAVE 6000 series. Ms. O'Neill. Okay, Dr. Francis, do you want to make a motion first, and then we'll have our discussion?
I make a motion to accept the policies included, the 6,000 to 6,200 plus the 9,130. I'm suggesting we take out policy 6,152 as grouping, since that one was changed for further discussion.
Do we have a second for that motion? Ms. Stowe, thank you. All right, discussion, Ms. O'Neill.
Following our procedure, this is the second read. We've gone through these procedures, these policies in prior meeting, and the one that we received some comments on was the grouping policy. We took that back to the committee and reworded the policy to make the changes that were acceptable to people who have objected to some of the wording that was there. And so I would move that we pass the policies as is and then remove the grouping policy, so discuss that separately.
Again, I believe that was Dr. Francis's motion, which is on the table. Other comments or questions about these policies? Mr. Scherer?
I don't want to get in the way of the board. I'm going to be voting no, and the only reason is I'm uncomfortable with the language at the bottom of policy 6144, controversial issues. Page 9. Although teachers have the right to express personal viewpoints and opinions, they do not have the right to indoctrinate students with their personal views. I just think that language is a little bit vague. This is an area where we've had some challenges historically, different than a college or university environment. In a K-12 environment, you have to recognize that teachers are in positions of authority of minor children. So this idea that we're not more clear about what it means for a teacher to express their personal opinions, particularly in the high school on political issues, is potentially problematic. So I appreciate what this language says, but I don't think it's specific enough, and it has the potential to create some issues. And then later, in another policy, there's some reference to separation of church and state, which I strongly support, but I don't think the policy is clear enough. As an example, I was in a middle school that will go nameless, and up on a board, I took pictures of it, I'll actually send it to all of you, was a complete collage of classwork essentially advancing a particular religion. Now, me personally, I wasn't particularly offended by that because I thought it was about educating about a religion. But at the same time that we thought that was okay, that we could be advocating or educating on one religion versus another in a middle school, doesn't seem to me to be the proper implementation of separation of church and state. So without those two things being more clear and strong from a policy perspective, I'd like to support all of the 6,000 policies, but for those two reasons, I can't support these policies as they're written.
What was the policy referring to, church and state?
Of course, in inimitable form, I left my doctored up copy at home. Yeah, it shows up in two places, but so I don't know. It's a great question.
Mr. Scherer, if you're interested, you certainly can make a motion to amend and send those back to PGC.
Yeah, I know. I just didn't want to. I know they're working very hard to move these along, so I'm trying not to get in the way. If PGC wants to, entertain that, I'll leave that to them. I'm trying not to be an impediment. I just wanted to be clear about the areas in policy, because I think we know how this works, right? Policy then translates into procedure. And if the policies are just not through intent, but just by what happens, a little bit fungible, I think you have to think downstream about how they get implemented. And it's just, that's what's on my mind.
Thank you.
So this is the wording that we're using is wording that's based on the CABE policies. And we've crosswalked them with our own policies. So I think, and it's slightly different what you're thinking is that I really think some of the teeth in this really comes through the regulations and how they're worded going forward. Because I think a policy needs to be broad. I think if we get too specific, you can't cover everything. So I think it's really the regulations that should cover how this is really implemented.
Can I just ask for a clarification though? It used to, regulations kind of are equivalent to what was in the old system of procedures, right? And procedures have no review no process review by the board. I mean, as a courtesy, a superintendent, if they choose to, might send it to us, ask us for comment, but there's no procedural review. So I appreciate what you're saying, Barbara. I'm just trying to follow along in the system we have. The board deals with these. The board doesn't deal with those regulations. So I don't know. I get your point, but and I appreciate that we're not trying to make them too constrictive. In this case, this one just bothers me, so that's where I am.
I hear what you're saying, Peter. On some of these, they're based on state law, right? So any procedure that follows them or regulation, as I guess they'll be called in the new model, is going to have to follow the same state law that these are followed. These also have been vetted through CABE's council, so I take comfort in that. And if there is something that comes up again, we always have the opportunity to revisit these policies. Is there any other discussion, Ms. Olson?
I just wanted to clear up any misconceptions that the fourth bullet was added to CABE policy. So the first three, yeah. So the first three, right?
Policy?
Right, the grouping policy. Sorry, 6152.
Just a point of order. So the motion is actually to send that back to PGC so that they can have further discussion and board members can give input. So if you want to give some input now, fine.
No, we just no.
We're voting on everything but this one.
Oh, got it.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I understand the motion on the table is to move the policies, but for the grouping policy.
Right, but my intention was to then discuss that separately, potentially.
Okay. Understood. Okay. All right, so if we have discussion on the main pack of the motion, the main policies, except for the grouping one. All right, is there other discussion?
I had a question also. The weighting policy, the idea is to move those to CABE, but also to come back and revisit that at another time, and is that weighting?
Right. So when there's...
So wait a second. I understood we were taking one out. Now are we taking two out?
No, we're just clarifying that we'll come back to that at another time when we have a more comprehensive look at the high school. I just don't think you can start cherry picking.
But this is up for adoption now. So this is what will be adopted if you accept these, right? And then if someone chooses to come back later and try to change it, is what you're saying. Mm-hmm.
Okay, with that, if there are no other comments, the motion on the table is to adopt CABE policy 6000 series up to 6200 with the exception of 6152 plus policy 9130. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye, raise your hand. All those opposed, passes 7-1. Thank you. Dr. Francis, do you want to make a motion on the other policy?
I move that we accept policy 6152.
Is there a second? Second. Ms. Dayton, discussion?
So you were about to say this, but I can say it. So we had added in ourselves as a policy committee the fourth bullet on advanced students. The feedback, I think, was concerned about that specific language and isolating that group in this particular circumstance. And I think, based on other conversations we've had about special ed and about other things, and the fact that this was a more general policy, it seemed like it might be beneficial to have a statement that more broadly discussed situations where peer grouping might be beneficial. We do have a separate policy that will be coming up specifically on gifted education that can be discussed separately. But the purpose of this was to allow for groupings such as ALP, but also to potentially open the door for grouping based on maybe other special needs or other things that we already do. And I was recalling when kids were hearing about, the lunch group, that grouped kids that might have social needs for better socialization at lunchtime, so there's so many ways in which we do group, and this was sort of saying, yeah, there's lots of different times when we may group based on academic issues or other special needs, and what we're saying is that both things, heterogeneous grouping and like grouping, can be beneficial, and that we should find the appropriate balance for each student.
Other discussion? Ms. Dayton.
I really don't think this is working. Aaron, I really don't think this is working. Sorry. I really support the new wording. Thank you so much. I really support the new wording because what's really important is that specialized programming is needed and targeted curriculum is far more powerful than the previous bullet point, which talks about pacing. In the era of personalized learning, all people, all children, all students will be able to move at their own pace towards mastery, and it signifies nothing to put that into a bullet point. What's really important is the targeted curriculum for the learners. So I think we have strengthened, not weakened our policy, and I couldn't be happier, and I will support it.
Any other discussion? Mr. Sheriff.
I'm sorry, Dr. Francis, so here it essentially drops that bullet, right? But I wasn't understanding, because that's existing policy, it's most certainly existing practice in Greenwich. So why would we drop that? It seems like a change in direction.
No, I mean, my feeling is that the fourth bullet still covers that, right? It's still saying that you can group kids based on academic need with a targeted curriculum, right? That covers out, but it also covers all kinds of other grouping that we do. And so in a general policy talking about grouping, I didn't think that we needed to itemize every specific one. We will still have a separate policy that's coming up in the next group on gifted students. So it's not saying that we can't do this, that we can't group advanced students. It's just saying that, in this policy, we're looking at the broader concept of, yes, heterogeneous grouping is helpful, as well as in sometimes like grouping is helpful. So it's just a more general statement that's not specifically pulling out advanced students as the only type of like grouping that you might do.
Mr. Sheriff, Mr. Sheriff, you want to raise your hand to be acknowledged? Thank you. Mr. Sheriff.
I guess the place I'm lost in this is, I've been around too long, right? This is an age-old debate. Heterogeneous versus homogeneous groups. This is like a policy debate that gets arm wrestled endlessly, right? And, but I'm just trying to read it in its plain meaning. In making group or placement decisions within individual schools, staff members must give due regard to the following, in this case, principle. Students can benefit. That to me is kind of like, it's subjective. Would it be stronger if it said students do benefit and therefore they have to take that into account? I mean, I get your point, right? It's because you could wind up with a scenario where someone just says, yeah, I thought so, but I just didn't think so.
Well, I think that we also have students can learn from heterogeneous groups. I think it was paralleling that and saying there's lots of different ways they can learn,
right.
And that you don't necessarily always pick the same method in the same circumstance. Maybe that's not what I meant to say.
That's right. It seemed the first one should also say the same. Students do learn much from students whose skills and difference are different. Well, I don't know. Okay.
Mr. Neal.
I think with my background, I don't think you'd ever think that I'd ever pass a policy that wasn't in the best interest of our advanced students. And I think Dr. Francis has explained it really well. and Mrs. Dayton, in that these principles include all forms of grouping, whether they be advanced students or students with social emotional needs or other academic needs. And again, we have a policy on gifted education that will reinforce the need for that program and its proper place within the district. So I'm happy with this, the wording on this policy.
Other discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to adopt 6152? 8-0. Thank you very much. That passes. Okay, we will move on to our next item, the school start time update action on modifications. Dr. Gilday.
Erin, are you going to click for me, or who's going to click for me? But you can leave it where it is right now. Are you clicking, or am I clicking, or am I going up there?
Oh, you want me to advance the slides?
No,
Okay.
not yet, but will you be able to?
Sure.
Thank you. And then I'm going to just click.
Right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
That'd be great. You have to see the nice pictures, right? We'll talk through it. Report. This is just a PowerPoint. All right, so here's a PowerPoint just to help guide us through some of our conversation tonight on the SST impact analysis and some updates. Students grow up in a multifaceted and ecological, social, biological, educational, familial, and extracurricular world. Educational policy recommendations due to factors in one area, in today's case biological, should not be made without understanding the functional realities that exist in others, societal, familial, and extracurricular. So just a starting point for us. At the same time, we still need to factor in all of the logistics that go along with school and transportation and how far our students are traveling to and from school, activities, and home, and what will happen in a ripple effect of our other schools when changes are made. Life is complex. In the end, we do the best we can, accounting for the variables and conditions that we can control. Right now, we'll click. Do you have a clicker? Oh, I'm so sorry, Erin. You're going to have to go back and forth. I apologize.
Good. I can see your screen, so I'll just advance when you advance.
Perfect. So right now, we are in the process of transition, and people that visit me in my office see this graphic hanging up. Right now, I'm kind of there between that, depression and hostility. Yeah. It's about that time of the year, so we can look at it. At least I got a laugh, right? So it was expected, in shifting start times, that there would be challenges, as with the implementation of any new system or initiative. Some of these challenges may work themselves out over time, and others must be addressed with specific adjustments. Tactics have been employed from before the start of the school year in order to try to minimize the impacts. However, they were designed to minimize and were not expected to eliminate or solve all logistics challenges. Those logistics challenges we faced are understandable and legitimate. It takes an all-in effort as a community to solve for these issues, be it the athletic system shifts of incorporating half practices or weekend extensions of practices, or even adjusting the idea of eliminating special scheduled midterms to gather back academic instructional time. We all need to come up with creative solutions together. Something I'm most excited about in Greenwich Public Schools is this kind of question. How do we adjust the school to fit each learner instead of the other way around? And I think when we look at our strategic initiative and strategic plan, this is really what we're aiming for in Greenwich. So what I've said from the beginning is start time is a logistical or a transactional issue in transformative times. What's really important is thinking about the limitless opportunities and potential of each learner, and that is where our efforts must be focused. And I think that was echoed in much of what we heard tonight. So really the exciting part is the vision, where we're going as a district. So I'm going to ask you for just a couple of minutes to listen to some of this, and that will put the context of our logistic shifts into perspective, I think. As a district, we're trying to look at the vision of the future with no boundaries to learning. What does it mean to have every student be able to reach their capacity informed by their needs, their strengths, and their readiness? Elementary schools education may have specific learning centers available via evidence-based best practice before and after school care, with innovative and integrated community partnerships providing that help for us and with us. Secondary schools in the future may provide a blend of seminar, workshop, collaborations, exhibitions, on-site and community-based learning, with some access to learning centers and other available community resources. Workforce will provide availability to access courses 24/7 in a blended learning environment and provide face-to-face in time blocks that are scheduled and available probably within a 12-hour time span in the future. As we look at an overview and a little bit of a background of where we've been, we have some procedural history, and again, it's just a reminder for those that are joining us, maybe not at this point of the conversation, is we had feasibility planning in 15-16 on the Start Time Initiative, and some topics I think were talked about with Start Time even prior, but this was really feasibility planning in 15-16. We then had Dr. Korda here last year working with implementation planning, and then I arrived. So understanding I'm the third person in 3 years to really try to touch this initiative and address the logistics. At the same time, we have the fourth MDO in the same time span, who's now called our COO, as well as a new transportation director and transportation system. So we're going to go with some assumptions, though, that the district is committed to recommendation and having an optimal 8:30 start time. We're going to go with the assumption that funding for transportation will, at a minimum, be maintained at the current level to support the current start time. There will be no short-term structural changes to Hillside Road, is one of our assumptions, as we work to solve for challenges. Our overview of our impact analysis provides, we had some pain points, just like you saw in my, can't go backwards, sorry. I can go backwards, you can't go backwards. In that little dip, right? So in any implementation, you're going to have some dip. So some of our pain points include, and which many of you have heard about through our presentations through the months and from the parents and children who participate, is we have some lost instructional time. And at the beginning of the year, that was for all students whose buses may not have arrived on time. And certainly we've tweaked, adjusted, modified, and the buses are arriving on time. We had some buses at the end of the day that weren't arriving on time to pick up. So that was a challenge and a stressor early in the year. We are still and continue through each season to, we're on an overview.
You're still on here?
There you go. Still on there. Sorry, lots of words. Lots of words on that slide. Okay. Athletics, we do know that athletes are losing instructional minutes due to early dismissal. To get to, you have to think about where we are in Fairfield County and where we are in Connecticut. We're at that really southernmost tip, and that does provide a pain point in traveling to other schools for meets. Because of some of this, we have some lost opportunity time for academic support and some of those other extracurriculars because we're spending time on buses. We have local and highway traffic congestion during pickup and drop-off times. So now we're at the next one where I already talked a little bit about, we've had some continuity of leadership, right? The board's had 3 superintendents they've worked with, 3 MDOs in 4 years, a first-year transportation director. We have a Connecticut State Department of Transportation study that shows there's heavy traffic throughout the state. This is not only Fairfield County, but we certainly have, we all know because we sit in traffic, especially Friday at like 11:30, you can't go anywhere. It seems like we're just stalled. We've got a wide variety of square mileage and a lot of different topography. So if we have an algorithm set our transportation routes, you really need a human to double check that because the algorithm can't always see the trees or the curves to the road. So some of those things are ongoing. We do have, as you all know, we've talked about the fields. So access to available practice spaces and the timing of getting to and from some of those rental fields has provided a pain point. So many of those challenges were known and tactics were implemented to try to minimize that impact. However, in the actual implementation, the tactics, as with traffic, they're designed to help, but they don't completely mitigate these situations. So the high school has done a remarkable job with rotating block schedule to help reduce lost instructional time from the same class again and again. What else? Some of the other things that were known, traffic, but I think we didn't realize it would be as heavy as it was, as early as it was prior to starting. And that has resulted in longer bus rides to away contests than we normally take. And the conference largely accommodated the start time shift, but not all. Schools were able to do that for us. As part of the root cause issue, we've experienced some challenges beyond what was previously identified or nuanced at the beginning of the time change. And these were addressed prior to the implementation of the shift, but we are looking at, through our own unique circumstance, some of our transition and locality has had stumbling blocks. So we're looking at next some concepts as we look at our current scenario and some ways we might mitigate, again, some of these shifts. So we've got the current scenario over there on the left. I hope it's on your left as well. So the high school being 8:30 to 3:15, middle schools 8 to 2:50, and elementary schools either 8:15 to 2:45 or 8:45 to 3:15. 3 of the schools are earlier, the rest of the 8 are a little bit later in the morning. Concept 1, as we consider looking at the 18-19 school year, would hold our GHS schedule the same as it is today, 8:30 to 3:15. But what we would be talking with the board about and asking for consideration of would be looking at that end of day creatively. It would be taking our class periods, adjusting them very slightly to provide an opportunity block at the end of the day. It would permit athletes to leave a little bit earlier without missing a heavy academic class, but would provide access and availability to teachers and potentially some creative courses like personal finance or personal branding or some of the club's activities and sports activities that they may not have a chance to participate in otherwise. So it would be scheduled, it would be something that kids would have an option and a choice in, and kind of steps us into personalized learning a little bit in the high school schedule. It would take some planning, we would probably have only a few options first, and we would grow those options through the years. So that would keep the 8:30 to 3:15. It would be asking for creative inside the day solutions. Option 2, the other thing, we actually shift the middle schools by 5 minutes in each of these scenarios. And the reason we do that is, like, historically, we have no idea why, but historically, the middle schools have been 5 minutes longer. Don't know why. So we're going to shift those. So we're going to give the buses just a couple minutes easier time to get to and from the schools and pick kids up. So we've got the middle schools ending at 2:45, and we kept the elementary schools the same. Any questions about concept 1 before I go on? That one's pretty easy. I'll go through all 3. Sure, absolutely. Concept 2 shifts dismissal time up slightly. So again, takes those same minutes that we might have used for creativity at the end of the day and just slightly adjusts our buses to pick up students at the high school at 3 o'clock. Doesn't solve every problem, but it gives us a chance to keep the beginning of the day at 8:30, just slight reduction of the time, maybe easing up the pressure slightly, but we still know our athletes are going to have to leave early. So again, we don't totally solve the problem, but it gives us a slight tweak or slight adjustment, just like we've been doing this year, these slight modifications. Concept 3, you heard about if you heard people tonight, or if you read Dr. Winter's letter, and we appreciate all of the hard work from the entire cabinet and leadership team. So this is another solution which would shift, would not lose any instructional time, it would simply shift everything back. So you would shift it about 15 minutes. But you would shift to the 8:15 start, getting the kids out at 2:45, which, as you probably heard the kids every month, that's basically what they have asked for, is an earlier end of day to give back some of that compression they feel at the end of the day. They're looking for sunshine, they're looking for time to get to work by 3 o'clock, they're looking for, not missing academic classes to travel to sports. So we've got 3 concepts here. We measured these 3 concepts against some standards. We looked at the compliance for the minimum amount of instructional time, and as you know, Greenwich has higher than the minimum, as most suburban districts do. So we have just some standards. So typically the benchmark in Connecticut is a minimum 5-hour instructional day. We obviously have greater than that. We have approximately a little over 1,100 hours per year. The benchmark or the standard, the minimum is 900. As a policy, we have a maximum tolerance for lost instructional time of our kids. By board policy, it's 10 missed courses per semester may result in lost credit. That would be the benchmark. Typically, we're seeing that we get. So we try to hold that to a higher standard than the state. In other words, we try to hold that to a higher standard. So we're always going to let parents know if their kids are missing. I've gotten a couple of those emails. Those aren't fun. Got to check up on the kids then. With the start time, we had the 8:30 as of June 17, but if you looked at June 16, there was a variance in that decision to be 8 to 8:30 is the way it was worded. Our contractual requirement for teachers is a 7.6-hour day. Our standard for bus arrival is 15 minutes before school, 10 minutes after school, the buses need to be there. And ideally, we would have 40 minutes between levels, tiers. We can make it work in 30. We're now at 15, so we're really, really tight, and that's where the buses are having some stress, as do our cars, right? We don't even get from school to school in 15 all the time. Operationally, at the schools that do have kids move between classes, there's about a 5-minute passing time, and our lunches, the state minimum is 20 minutes, the Fairfield County average is 22 minutes, and ours is a 30-minute lunch block, or it's called a wave. All right, so when we look at those 3 concepts, similar to what I talked about at the beginning of the presentation, the vision's the exciting part. Some of the logistical challenges that I mentioned, though, I said we were mitigating and trying to tweak, and that's what we're continuing to do, because none of these concepts exactly solve every one of our problems. We do meet the minimum standard no matter what concept we look at. We do have a tolerance that we really don't want kids missing instructional time on a regular basis. We do want the kids to be able to arrive at a scientifically positive standard. We do have the required time for teachers. So if we make any shift, we have to talk with teachers about that first. We do want to hold true to the standard of the buses arriving 15 minutes before class starts and being at the schools 10 minutes before the kids exit at the end of the day. And the transition time we didn't talk too much about. The high school's pretty big. We didn't know that we could really do it in less than 5 minutes. We really don't want to see kids have to, scarf down their food too much faster than the 30 minutes. We think that would lead to another health issue. So, we looked at this kind of trying to chart out and see what things might help us. We currently, as you know, if you have a high school student, have a 6-drop-2 rotating block of 58 minutes with the 30-minute lunch wave. Concept 1 adjusts within the school day up to 45 minutes for either a condensed course, a club, capstone development, mentoring program, special assemblies, special industry standard certifications, or an opportunity block. Some of the flexibility at the end of the day presents possibilities for future readiness, teacher-student collaborations, personalized extended learning experience, and built into the time with the rhythm of the week. Next slide. Our comparative analysis of viable Greenwich High School concepts relative to the current scenario. We're looking again at the 3. Scenario 1, according to adequate disembarking time, really no change to the current state. If we change to 3 o'clock, we're still dismissed prior to peak commuter times, as well as scenario 3. Instructional time, we exceed the state requirement. In scenario 1, you would shorten the periods to be able to grab that opportunity block. In scenario or concept 2, you've got a 15-minute adjustment by design. And then in scenario 3, we have flexed earlier, which does provide a benefit to our athletes and some of our extracurricular programming. With reduced traffic, we are looking at staged arrivals and student parking. Parallel to this, we have a Hillside Road committee that's coming up with recommendations by June 1st, and we're already seeing certain enforcements of not double parking and things like that are helpful. Scenario 2 puts us very, very close to Central and Greenwich High School, leaving at the same time. And then we do get some end-of-day relief for extracurriculars in scenario 3, but it really is not as cost-effective transportation-wise because then the middle schools are leaving the same time as the high schools. But we like to provide Vicki with some challenges. We don't want her to be bored in this first year of being a transportation director. And some people chuckled at that, right? I like to, the puzzles, right? It's like a jigsaw puzzle. It'll all fit some way. And then the budget at this point, it is already approved, so we don't really have the flexibility for shifting the costs for next year. With scenario 3, we may be looking at an increase in cost. In scenario 2, we may be looking at some tight release times and dismissals. Scenario 1 obviously keeps what we have. So, in brief, scenario 1 for the high school, 2 for the high school, and 3 for the high school is the focus of the conversation because elementary remains the same for 18-19. Middle school is shortened by 5 minutes, really just to parallel other teachers' contracts, otherwise remains the same. We're good so far? All right, we'll keep going. You guys are hanging in there. I'm impressed. So for our next steps, we do want to monitor our key performance indicators against this year's benchmarks, attendance tardiness, bus timeliness, probably a modified, slightly shortened sleep survey. The last one is really, really long, and we're finding there are certain data points that are more important than others. That is affirmed by Dr. Owens from Harvard, who said, pick out a few. You don't need to do, a grand, 40-minute survey. So we are going to make sure we key into that with the best research-based questions. We're going to analyze the tiering of the buses annually with a transportation routing efficiency audit. We are going to continue our high school redesign efforts. We already have a Visioning Secondary Schools committee started. We're also already working on personalized learning in all kinds of ways, and we already have online learning courses available. Some districts that work with start time shifts also promote the idea of one of the courses being an online course that's deployed. All right, and I had moved around the presentation. I can't do that because this was on a flash drive, so you didn't get to see the fun visual. Sorry about that. I had a fun picture in there. So my recommendation for 18-19, because everybody said, are you going to have a recommendation? Well, I've got 3 recommendations, kind of, but because I think any one of them would work. But I'm going to talk through this recommendation with everybody, and then we'll have board conversation or reaction to that. So my recommendation for 1819 would be to outline an operations and logistics plan in alignment with the board direction, looking at scenario 1 or concept 1, which would be the 8:30 to 3:15, adding an opportunity block. It would consider local conditions, build a model program at Greenwich High School that permits students flexible entry and exit within the comprehensive program of instruction. It would engage students, staff, and our community with extension, enrichment, and enhancements, as well as some opportunities even for catching up when needed. It would ensure staff and students have time to connect, close opportunity gaps, make up work related to early egress for student athletes, as well as give us a place to really do some of the innovative work that we're doing as a district. And some of that we call, micro prep, the potential to bring in a coding class perhaps at the end of the day, some industry certifications, other supports for students, college visits, health fairs, assemblies, things like that, that obviously have to be scheduled and planned, but I think could really be of benefit to the district and to the school. So as we're looking at any of these options, we need to look at maximum tolerance for lost instructional minutes due to early dismissals. As we analyze and review our time shift policies, as in all democracies, new information surfaces, people's positions change, and issues get brought back to the table for re-examination. We try not to close doors, but try to look at the opportunities in front of us. I look to collaboration and consensus building around these topics. The board has made a well-reasoned decision and shares the concern about traffic and our field's access and ensuring that we're not late to school or athletic events. We all care about school schedules, family time, and some of the other issues that have arisen. There are pros and cons to each concept or scenario presented, and each allows us to consider the needs of Greenwich Public Schools and our Greenwich High School students. We're working to maintain the principle and standard of an 8.5 to 9.5 hour sleep cycle, understanding that the later high school date time starts, the easier it is for most adolescents to maneuver. We recognize that the rotating block has provided mitigation and relief of some missed class time at the end of the day, and even provides a helpful morning for those who have first or second open block. Envisioning future schools, there will be coursework offered in a variety of ways and formats, in an anywhere, anytime for learning environment. We can't ignore our local conditions, but as we move forward and plan for next steps, and as we outline an operational logistical plan in alignment with the board direction, I'm certain we're going to see continued improvement of the implementation.
Okay, with that, we'll open for discussion. So, Ms. Dayton.
Thank you so much for refining the idea that I presented at the work session around that last block and using it for personalized learning, using it in our mastery-based system, using it to allow students to pursue their interests and their passions while keeping the 8:30 start time. I'm very, very encouraged that you have found in scenario 1 a solution that is going to work for as many students as we can accommodate. I'm very interested in the flexible leaving time. I'm going to make the assumption that you're talking about ending the rotational blocks, keeping fixed blocks, shortening them to 53 minutes, and that last block of the day at times will be used for athletes to get to games, at times will be used for specialized programming or assemblies or conferring with teachers or picking up new skills or reinforcing strengths. I think it fits perfectly into a personalized learning plan, and thank you so much for being creative in the solution.
So just to clarify, the rotating block is still in existence. It's just that last block of the day that's left open.
As the committee works on visioning secondary schools, I think they're going to study that. I think that's one of the topics they're looking at, because as we look at partnerships with Wright Tech High or even community colleges or college coursework coming in, I think that maybe we'll have a modified block that rotates in the morning, and maybe afternoons might look different.
Ms. Stowe.
Quick question. You said that can you go back to, you said that in scenario 3, that the busing would be more expensive, and I'm a little confused because currently we have 315 for the high school and all the elementary schools, and so now this would simply align with the middle school. So we're talking about 11 schools as opposed to 3. So I'm a little confused as to why the busing would be more expensive in scenario 3.
It's called stacking with tiers, and we have stacking, right? So there's, everybody has an acronym or kind of a terminology. So tiers are the start and end time, and typically the most financially efficient way is, having 3 starts and stops in a district our size, right? So that would be the most efficient, is having 839, for instance, or 839, 930. Those would be the most efficient. We don't really have that right now. We kind of have 1.5. And the way we've doubled it or stacked the buses is with elementary middle, not with middle high. So it's just the way the routes are doubled up. So they run, it used to be very efficient that everybody came to the center of Greenwich to the high school prior to the worst of the traffic times. Then they went to their regionalized middle schools. Then they went out to their elementaries, other than the 3 early start schools. So it had a system or a rhythm, and now it's a little more shotgun, and we run into the worst part of traffic. So it's a logistics challenge. I think it's just something to acknowledge. I think it's something to continue to educate people about. The roads are crowded. So we'd have to we don't want to, we will spend the time on the logistics and operational plan once we know the board direction. Otherwise, to cost out 3 of them takes a lot of hours, a lot of time. But we know already, and we have ideas of how many buses it would take and what we'd have to uncouple.
Dr. Francis.
I have like a million questions, but I'm trying to think of like a few to start with. But in terms of the, I'm sort of trying to think about how to preserve as much of the educational time for the core classes as possible. And it seems like there are a lot of things that we routinely do that cut away at that. So the Thursday mornings, there's typically a mentor thing or a choice or something. And so pretty regularly we're cutting into that, or assemblies or other things. Would we try and fit as much of that as possible into that last period? So that in a sense we wouldn't be losing as much of the time at other times, and we would be fitting a lot of that into there. So that would make up some of what we currently are looking at and thinking of as lost time. Actually, we're just rearranging some of it.
Ms. Olson.
So the opportunity block for athletes that have games would be dismissed at that time. What about students that have jobs and financial commitments or family commitments where they need to pick up a younger sibling, or would they then need to wait until 3:15? Because I think we need to be equitable if we're going to dismiss some people based on athletic commitments, which seems to be a necessity from what I've seen and heard. Then I also think that wouldn't be fair. We need to keep an eye out for the students that have jobs. They shouldn't be forced to wait until 3:15 to get to that job and wait for the transportation. So I think that's an entire cohort of our student population that we're overlooking.
So the future, I think, is flexible, adaptive, and I think this allows us a step into that.
Okay.
And so I think that is a part of it. And I do think it's meeting the student's need, and it's meeting a family's need, and it's meeting a work need. And I think there are lots of opportunities for it.
To follow up more concrete, will there be transportation provided for those students that have jobs and family commitments?
Right, so that is the part that we're talking about, because of course if it's 2:45, that parallels the time of the middle school getting out. However, I don't think everybody's going to exit at 2:45, so I think it provides us, again, even a traffic benefit, because if some students are going to their practices or their games, some students are leaving for work, some students are taking advantage of an extra course opportunity like personal finance that they might not have otherwise. Others are seeking the support or help that they need, or making up a test, or having time with the teacher. I think all of those things provide us, we're going to have kids almost like do a checkbox. You need the bus this time, don't need the bus that time. They're going to have some opt-in, opt-out kinds of participation with that.
It may not stop at every stop. It may be more of a hub and spoke kind of system. It may be, some things like that. So we're going to have to explore some alternates and some options, but I think that's, again, a nice future look at transportation as well.
Mr. Scher?
I have a question and I wanted to give some feedback or share something. Can you just be a little bit more specific on the suggestion, the proposal you're making about how does the end of day, what does that look like? We have a 6.75 hour day. And your proposal is to keep it at 6.75 hours, right? And you're suggesting that we cut up the time differently, right? Love that. So is the suggestion to maintain the block system as it exists right now? We run a 6 block. Lots of people run a 7 block. They don't run a 6. We run a 6 block. Is it to reduce those blocks to create a, let me call, 7th block that doesn't rotate? And how long would that 7th block be? Do you know now, or maybe if you don't?
So if we wanted to offer a credit-bearing class, it would need to be 40 minutes minimum.
Right.
That's a state requirement,
If it didn't?
state statute. If it didn't, it's 30.
Your proposal is probably 30, right?
I would hope that the high school would consider 40. If there's a way to do that with a mixture of passing time, maybe it's 2 minutes off lunchtime and a couple minutes off classes, I think we could get there. And the reason for that would be, maybe you could do wellness in 40 minutes. Maybe you could do that personal finance in 40 minutes. Maybe you could work with your capstone advisor during that time, which is a credit-bearing class. If we make it 30 minutes, it could not be credit-bearing.
Jill, here's something I'd ask you to consider. We've known this for almost 2 years now, that the high school schedule, because we run a 6-block rotating block, that it was always this challenge for student athletes, right? We talk about these contests like they're leaving all the time. These are away games. Football I've only had 4 last year. So I just need to keep it in perspective, but we have to solve the problem because they don't fall on a particular day, they scatter all over the place. So you have to have a systematic answer. I liked this idea. I don't know who originally presented this. This was presented almost 10 months ago as this potential solution. I always liked this idea because it kept the school day, kids in school, learning, and it aligned to where we're eventually going in personalized learning. And by the way, I applaud you for really embracing it and trying to make it something that would work in Greenwich. I've learned 2 things, though, talking to other high schools who face the same challenges we did. And I learned about solutions that I wouldn't have thought of. One is to get off of a rotating block schedule, okay, to get to a standard schedule. And if you get to a standard schedule, then that last block can be given to athletes so that it's always a non-academic class or it's a free block. And exactly what you've done, which is brilliant, which is how do you solve the problems for athletes and non-athletes at the same time. It can be done, and I'm really glad you've proposed a way to do that. The other one, though, and the closest one to look at is from your old neighborhood. It looks just like us. It's Barrington, Illinois, same size as we are, same geographics, same demographics. Brilliant how they solved it. The second one, though, to look at, which I thought was really interesting, was Gunn High School in Palo Alto, which covers Stanford University. They run a little rotating block, and what they did is they kept their rotating block except for the last period of the day. They turned the last period of the day to fixed. It's always block 8, and they didn't have to blow up their whole schedule, because I don't think, and here's kind of the point and the question, I think what you're suggesting is you want to make a potential change for 18-19. Is that a given? that that has to happen in your book. But it's coming so late, you cannot change, you can or cannot change the rotating block schedule. The kids are scheduled in classes, right?
No, but the high school does not have a desire at this moment to shift the rotating block schedule.
They've
because
never
they
had a
believe
desire.
Academically, it gives the kids that opportunity to do the additional courses without the stress every day, and there's a lot of reasons that they prefer that. There is no magic to 58 minutes, so 55 is going to be fine, or 54 is going to be fine. To grab that, the work is going to be in the ensuring that the capstone and/or courses are ready for the fall, so that kids have something they can opt into. Because of course they'll be there for mentoring, of course they'll be there for an assembly, but then what are the other things that they might want to?
This is my last concern, I'll leave it here, is these other proposals, like the one that Dr. Winters foisted on us in the paper.
People don't make personal attacks at meetings, so you know better.
Shared another idea. That was one of these. That
isn't a personal attack, Peter.
It's on the screen. It's a proposal.
My point with it proposal drops 15 minutes a day, 180 days. That's 7 days of instruction to drop. So it's effectively 7 days of classroom time we would be dropping by doing it that way. Is there, in this proposal, do you preserve all that instruction time, or you just translate it into different type of instruction time? So you preserve all the instruction time, but it's a different type of instruction time?
Right, it's another option for kids, because part of the personalized learning environment is you're looking at options, you're looking for voice and choice, you're looking for student readiness and strengths, ways to show different kinds of talents and activities. It's also, though, looking at, again, there's already a committee on redesigning or reimagining middle school. It's looking at finals differently, or midterms. Midterms in the middle of the year, you may grab 4 days back of instruction because you're just going to do an assessment during the course of the day in the middle of the year, and you hold your final exams for the end of the year, where it's a special design day. So we'll try to grab back minutes all kinds of ways.
Ms. Stowe.
So scenario 3 is obviously something that you're proposing, or as one of the options, and obviously, as you pointed out, one of our own has suggested it, and I will admit I'm not as familiar with the high school block schedule, but it seems like sort of a simple solution that you've come up with, so there must be a reason that one of our own had suggested something else. And so I guess that's why, is it just the cost that's the sort of holding you back from scenario 3, or is it because of the bus schedule, or is there something else?
Right, so scenario 3 moves us slightly earlier in the morning, so it's 8:15 with the kids getting out at the 2:45. It's really not asking for any other adjustments during the day. It's not that you couldn't do an adjustment during the day. You certainly could still do that, right? You could still offer a 30 or 40-minute option, 45-minute option. The high school, interestingly enough, in its history, has had flexible times for their class periods in the past. They had 45 or 60-minute courses. That was one of Lauren's ideas, actually. Middle schools, interestingly, I don't know if Carol's still here, but middle schools, interestingly, we pulled out a 1963 handbook and saw the exact same schedule. So I'm really excited that the middle schools have been innovating and looking at creative scheduling as well, which is another reason I prefer for 18-19 not to shift middle schools. We've already shifted them once. I'd like to not do that for next year. They have adjusted to the 15 minutes. I'd like to give them another year to work with that.
Ms. Raven.
Am I on? Okay. So I like the ideas of scenario 1 and 2 with the flexibility of that last block. And the reason why I like it is I think there's things that we can be bringing in and, as you said, get to that personalized, more modern, using technology. And then I think it'll also allow us to start to focus on some of the other stressors that our students are experiencing. So midterms, too much homework is spending more time. Even the athletes are practicing more time than they used to practice. So I think it'll allow us to start to focus on some of the other stressors that students are experiencing. My concern with scenario 3 is because the high school is so close to Central and it's the middle school timing, like we're not going to do any improvements for the congestion around that area because the start and stop is so close to that middle school.
Ms. Dayton.
I noticed the wording on one of the slides and talked about not only the flexible end time, but it also stated a flexible start time. Can you expand on that? Because I don't think we've touched on that in previous discussions.
Certainly. Well, right now, for the kids who do have first and second rotating block, there are every other day, the kids are able to come in at 9:30 right now. It's awesome. Those are the kids who are truly getting the benefit, if you want to know the truth of the whole thing, right? Those are the kids who are able to actually sleep in. So that is something I think the future is much more flexible. I think for some kids, although adolescents typically develop this, rhythm, we all need they need 8.5 to 9.5 for sure, and it's really hard. They don't want to go to bed before 11, right? They're talking to their friends and they're getting their homework done and all kinds of things in the evening. They're on social media, they're doing all kinds of stuff at night. But I also think there are some kids that don't have that. They put themselves to bed earlier. They wake up earlier naturally. And right now, a 1-2 open for them is not the best option because they like getting to school a little bit earlier. So I think in the future, you're going to see schools, I think, being more of those community centers where you see a longer day that they're open and then you just access. So similar to Mr. Scheer had mentioned some schools he studied. I've studied schools that they're open. The 12 hours, kids are just responsible for accessing 6 hours of instruction during that time. They could work a middle shift in the middle of the day if they want. For teachers and professionals, it allows them more flexible scheduling that works with their family and their lifestyle. So the field is changing, the world is changing, and education is coming right along with that. So we have the safety and the security of having a school where you're checking in and checking out, but you also access community resources. And that's where I think we're going to see community-centered schooling.
Ms. O'Neill.
I like the idea of sticking with the original schedule that we have now, because it'll give us another year to collect the data and to see what are the strengths and weaknesses of the system. And I think the other thing I think that's even more exciting is the idea that it's going to make us, motivate us to think about time in school differently, especially at the high school, for us to think more creatively. I think we would have gotten there eventually, but I think this is the impetus is going to push us to think about more creatively a little quicker than we would have.
Thank you.
So I just want to add that, the whole process, it should have always been iterative. This was never set the time and forget about it. And I think the proposal for option 1, it's going to be learning. You said in the first year we might do these things, and the second year maybe you add to that. And I just want to recognize that this does, like Ms. O'Neill said, give us the option to re-envision our day. So maybe this is just the starting point. So I don't want to hear a year from now, you just did this and you're changing it again. I think change is actually a good thing. It's very slow in education, but in the outside world, we change a lot faster. We learn from what we do, and we should always be doing that. So I'm happy to see this as a step forward. Hopefully it will resolve the most issues. I was counting the check marks, and I think really this is the path forward that gets us closer where we want to be. So happy to see that. Dr. Francis.
It would make me unbelievably happy if you would consider taking some of those things that are making kids go in at 7:30 and putting them at that end block.
Wouldn't that be great?
Oh my goodness, I would kiss the floor.
And I think that's the part that we're going to have to really work again as a board and community to understand. We have to rethink too. If there's something that works best there, if Yearbook can meet there, if Literary Magazine can meet there, if Student Government can meet there, that would be awesome for kids. Right?
So
other personal finance, they might be able to do 2 days a week. Right.
But right, I mean, there are other things that government is constantly getting pulled out of classes. But to me, I think the fact that we have music, we have We the People, things that are part of our core academics that are going to require kids to get in at 7:15 or 7:30, which is clearly much earlier than the recommended 8:30. If we can put those at the end of the day, then I think we also are really then gaining that much more benefit in terms of that sleep. because you can have kids that might have to come in twice a week early, and to be able to have them do that 8:30 start would really be a blessing.
Mr. Chair, did you?
So I just had a question. So is this kind of is the long range, and I think I heard you say this, the long range is to really we've danced around it, but it's really to reimagine how this whole thing works, right? Is that your vision of where we should ultimately go whenever we go there? And therefore, is this just kind of an interim step along the way? Yes?
Yes, I mean, I think that's the point. Like I've said it all along, it's really a transactional shift in transformative time. So getting all hung up on a minute or on a time, it's not going to be all about that. It's going to be about meeting the kids where they are and providing for them what they need. There are certain guidance counselors that they don't put the kids in those first block because, they make sure the kids have a later time because the family or the kids say, we need that. And I think that's part of what the future of education is. It's taking the kids what they need, getting them what they need, and providing the supports for them.
Here's my question to my fellow members on the board. Are we ready to make this decision? Because if we're ready to make this decision, I mean, this is I hadn't expected this. This is a strong recommendation from the superintendent. I want to support the superintendent. It seems like there's broad support. It seems like it's a reasonable plan that brings together stakeholders, doesn't divide them, solves real problems. Candidly, this has already gone on 4 meetings. If we can tell the administration and give them the support they need, and the more time we give them for implementation, the better. If it's the pleasure of the board, I'll move the item to support the recommendation.
So amazingly, you're reading my mind because I'm about to make a motion. And let me. We still have discussion? It's okay. Let me basically lay this out what I envision, which is a motion to support. I guess we've called it Concept 1. And ask the superintendent to develop an implementation plan and come back and present to us in June for implementation and obviously there'll be revisions to the plan over the summer. I also plan to call for regular periodic updates next year and any future revisions at that point. I think that's the logical step forward. So at this point, I'd like to make a motion for the superintendent to move forward with Concept 1 and to come back at the June 14th board meeting with a draft implementation plan.
Do we need that?
I think you're already thinking
I wonder
about
if I have confidence in Jill that she's going to go figure this out. I don't want to I'm happy endorsing her and letting her go do her job.
Yeah, I got a second. I know. Mr. Scher's making a comment. Okay, my thinking on having the updated June 14th, where we fell down last time, in my opinion, is that we failed to have a proper implementation plan. I'm not looking for every detail. What I'm looking for is larger check marks, where they're going to focus their attention, when we can expect to get updates. I'm not looking for complete detail here. I know this will be a thoughtful process, but I want to assure people that we are going to continue to pay attention to this. And as I said before, this is not set it and forget it. Ms. Olson.
So Dr. Goulet said there's 3 recommendations and any one of them would work. I think we need to take into consideration Dr. Winters, who spends probably more time than he might want to at the high school, is there night and day. I think that we are making incremental changes. I don't see how making a shift that would be more of a common sense compromise solution like scenario 3, I don't understand how that would prevent us from shifting the schedule. We still have that. We're fixing some logistical problems, helping students with jobs, helping students with athletics, helping students with all these different ways, and still being able to be innovative about our schedule. I don't think that necessarily prevents us from doing that. And I guess that's a question too. How does that prevent us?
We're discussing
We're having a discussion on the motion. Dr. Francis.
So I am more excited about this proposal than I had expected to be. Well, I didn't know we were getting a proposal, which I have to say, as excited as I am about this, I am a little before coming in here, when someone said, we're hearing 3 proposals tonight and we might be voting, and I thought, how could that possibly be? Because I feel like, you know, generally speaking, we get information at a work session, we think about it, we have time then at the public meeting to get input from people, for people to have time to think through the issues and then make a decision. So I am a little bit torn because part of me is like, I want to grab this, it sounds great. My superintendent's told me this is what they want. And I guess to me, speaking of compromise, that concept of coming back in June and hearing about it is sort of a way for us to get another chance to talk about it, think about the details, think about the issues. I think I am prepared because I'm so excited to vote on this tonight, but I have to say, I do still feel like it's a precedent that worries me a little bit. And I think, I hate to put a downer on this because I am really excited, but I feel like there's been this inching towards we're getting reports later, we're having less time to think about things as we're going into meetings, you know, proposal is coming out, and I'm desperately trying to kind of write down all the things I'm thinking of and prioritize which are really the ones that are worth asking, and I just feel like a little more opportunity to understand this beforehand and have thought through some of the questions would have been appreciated, but in the end, I'm gonna support going ahead and voting it because I do think a thoughtful process will come from this and that we will come up with something really good.
Other comments? Ms. Olson.
I think getting this information in really the 11th hour makes it difficult to process and make a well thought out decision on a vote that clearly a lot of people care a lot about and impacts all of our students. I think that being given this and then saying, okay, we're voting right now is not necessarily best practice.
Any other discussion? All right, I'll call the question. Oh, Ms. Stowe.
I have to agree with Ms. Olson. I too would like to have a little more time to opine on this. This is information that was just handed to us. We've received a lot of emails today, yesterday, the past few days. I've been digesting all of those things, and then I've been given a lot of information. I'm the type of person that wants to support Jill, but I also want to have some time to analyze numbers and data. So I would sort of ask to defer the vote.
Mr. Chair.
Call the question.
All right, all those in favor of the motion to support concept 1 with the report from the superintendent at the June 14th board meeting? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All those opposed? 2. Passes 6-2. Thank you very much, everybody. Obviously, this is a topic that we're going to continue to look at and discuss. You know, I thank the community for all of their comments and thoughts, the hard work of the work group that went into this, the thoughtfulness. I know it's a lot of work. It's a little bit of change. Change is not the worst thing. We just need to be thoughtful about it. So thank you, everyone, for that.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Seconded the motion.
Ms. Dayton.
Oh, thank you.
All right, with that, we'll move on to our next item, which is the special education report. Ms. Dayton.
I want to pick up on a theme from the work session, and that theme is having a full program review. I think that's important. I think we had consensus in the work session, but I'd like to double check that we did have consensus.
So my thinking on that, as I've reflected on it, is the way to properly do this is to make sure there's funding and timing. We have so many things going on. I think what I would like to do is start developing a thought as to a plan. There's going to be a cost to this. If we're doing a full deep dive plan, building that into next year's budget. And I know it takes another year out, but it doesn't mean there's not work that's going to go on. This is not the only time we see Ms. Ford. We enjoy seeing her. She enjoys seeing us. But I think if we're going to do a proper program evaluation, that it's going to need to be well thought out, well planned, and included in that budget. That's my thinking.
I support that. I think that my main point was making sure that there is consensus on actually doing that review. I heard it in the work session, but if there's anyone disagreeing with that, I'd like to hear about it tonight.
Mr. Scher.
I've thought about this a lot since our last work session. And and I'm in the same place, we still need to plan it, but I'm going to change what I think about it. I do think we need a program review, and let me tell you why. I've sat through every single meeting on this for the last 9 years on special ed, and the thing always bothers me, and what bothers me is, and I don't know if it bothers anybody else, finally figured it out. Our entire conversation is about compliance. Our entire conversation is about compliance with the law. The report's about compliance. Everything's about compliance. So and that's not a bad thing because it provides a framework necessarily to do a review. But you know what I was thinking about? I was thinking about, because it's always about compliance when we talk about it, we never really have the conversation of the compliance with the law could be secondary, and we could envision what we want special education to look like in Greenwich. And instead of it being everything centered around complying, it could be, what do we want to do? What do we want to do with twice exceptional? What do we want to do with opt-in? What do we want to do with a whole range of topics? And then compliance just becomes something that has to happen. So whatever plan comes up has to fit. And it took me a while to get to this place where I understand what was always bothering me about these conversations about this. And therefore, I think, and I'd like to do it either through one of our retreats, or we need to make this a topic where I think we have a meaty conversation as a board, or I'd like to participate in a meaty conversation about a board, about vision, not about compliance, and then have that feed. If there were to be a program review or something at some time in the future, how would it fit into a collaborative vision for special education that's developed between the board and the relevant administrators? And, by the way, preferably members of the community who are really interested in that, some of who spoke tonight, and maybe some others who have been very passionate about this topic over time. It's a way to build a community consensus and have a strong vision of special education for the future.
So, Mr. Shea, that's actually timely because we are looking at the schedule for next year. We're going to meet with Barbara as the PGC chair and also just a member of the executive committee, and we're going to work on that. So, Dr. Francis.
I guess my sense is, and I think this is sort of an echo, is that if we're going to do it, I want it to be very thoughtful, and I want us to have a real clear sense of what we're trying to get out of it, but because just to have a really long thing that explains what we're currently doing and spending a lot of money for that, to me doesn't seem worthwhile. And I feel like there was pretty recently, we had a big presentation, I guess it was while I was on the board, so it was maybe 2 years ago or around that time. So I don't think we want to spend a lot of money to do the same thing. So I think there needs to be a really clear understanding of what is it that we're trying to do. How does this fit into the strategic plan? How does it fit into other pictures? You know, are we looking at different models? What is it that we want to get out of this before we just sort of say, yes, we want to review? So I think I would want to be very careful, and I wouldn't want to rush into it if it's not next year, if it's going to take more planning time. And I think one of the things I keep saying is I would like us to pick really important topics and have really good, thorough discussions as a board, spend a lot of time on it, and really kind of make something that's going to move us forward. If that's what we're envisioning, then I would be in support of it. If it's sort of a review to be a review that kind of tells us what we're doing, I'm not.
Other discussion, Ms. Dayton.
Well, I support everything that's been said. I've never been interested in compliance particularly. In the work session, I envisioned a totally new redesigned transitions program for our 18 to 21-year-old population. So I'm on that wavelength. I support everything that Dr. Gilday said and that Mr. Scher said. And I think this is very exciting because Greenwich seems to be a district that leads the way on so many aspects of education. It would be tremendous if we could be innovative in the field of special education. Putting it out there, we have a new director at CES. Please use him as a resource, not as the person to do the study, no, but as a person that is willing to tell you
what innovations are happening in other districts that we may want to consider?
Ms. Olson.
I would be in support of, if we're going to do this, to really focus on the twice exceptional student, because we have a lot of students that, as was said earlier, we're setting the bar not as high as we can, and I think that there needs to be a focus on meeting the needs of each student so that they can meet their maximum potential. That's our goal here, is to take the students through personalized learning, through in every area with accelerated or special ed or both, because I think a lot of the times, as was mentioned before, I think it was mention of Einstein or something, but it was the thing that stuck with me is that there's, again, an entire cohort of students that we are not bringing into maximum potential, and I think we need to rethink that entirely.
So, Ms. Rabin.
I know it's in the context of a special ed program review, but I still like to see like how everything fits in the big picture, because the vision of one thing might, I don't know, not be in coherence with the vision of something else. And I'm thinking with my budget hat on. So just to see how all the pieces work together and not so much focused in isolation.
So what I'm thinking about, because at our June meeting, we're going to be setting the budget priorities as Ms. O'Donnell's going to be working over the summer tirelessly, starting to think about building out that budget. Maybe that what we do is we take a sense of the meeting vote tonight and as a budget priority, think about money for an evaluation for special education. I don't know how people feel about that. Okay, so I'd like to make a sense of the meeting motion that as we do our budget considerations in June, that we add a special ed evaluation into that document. Second from Ms. Dayton. Any discussion? Dr. Francis?
I'm gonna support that, but I would like to say that I always hesitate a little bit when I feel like I'm supporting something in isolation. So what I'm supporting is the concept of putting it in there so we can then balance and make a decision. Not that I'm saying I want it in there and I'm definitely going to keep it there. I think it's going to be something where I want to see, okay, what are the pros and cons? What is the administration recommending? So my vote in support is to have it as a line item for us then to understand how we think it compares and addresses, and do we think we're ready for that, or do we need time to think about it more before we would do it and have a bigger discussion on it?
I think that's absolutely right, and I think this would be an item that would be in the 19-20 budget. So we do have time, but in order to make sure that it gets into that process for thinking about can we actually get it done, we need to do that now. So if there's no other discussion, I'll call the question. All those in favor? That's the meeting motion. 7. All opposed? 0. Passes 7-0. All right. And the special ed monitoring report, does somebody want to make a motion to put that before us? Ms. Dayton, is there a second? Yes, Dr. Francis. All right, I just want to clarify, this is putting the report before us, it's accepting the report, not recommendations. This is an issue we've discussed in the past. So is there any discussion on the special education report at this point? Ms. Stowe.
Mary, I just wanted a question. I think I said I asked you in the last session. I'm sorry.
I'm loud enough at this hour, aren't I? No? Okay. And I'm sorry to ask this question again, because I think I sort of alluded to it in the work session, but in the new page that you were good enough to add in response to our questions at the work session, the overall expenditure for Greenwich is 188, and our budget last year was or this year, whatever we're in, is 153. So the difference of the 35 million, is that potentially all grant money? Or rather funding from the state? What is the differential?
It's a number of different things. Part of it is salaries. As the more experienced teachers leave, those salaries go down, so part of it is salaries. We've also decreased, if you notice this year, line 208, which is at a district tuition, which we're now in a little bit of trouble with. So it's a compilation of a number of different lines going in, and it also is, in some ways, the impact of the grant. We got a little more money in the grant last year. But remember, under IDEA, we cannot spend any less year to year on special education.
Right.
And we have to, right, we have to actually file a report if there's any discrepancy, which we had to do this year.
The overall is actually not the special ed budget, I think, that she's pointing out. It's the overall.
It's our overall Greenwich number, which is.
It comes out at 188 million.
Ours was a little bit less. Ours was less year to year. We had to do some explaining to the state on the number, and it was due primarily to salaries.
Yeah, I think this is more of a Lori question, I'm sorry. But, so basically, it's the overall budget. And then it would affect your percentage, obviously. So your percentage is very nicely in line with your comps, so that's a good thing. But what I'm just trying to figure out is the denominator, which seemingly is a bit different than our actual budget this year by 35 million. But right, and this is 188.
The numbers that I put in this report came from the district profile and performance report, which is the state report. So I don't know what went into, this may have included numbers in it that are put in there to be consistent with other districts.
I wonder if they include some of the town packages. Maybe there must be, the benefit packages must be in here. Yes,
when you see our budget, you don't see benefit costs because they're carried by the town. In some other districts they are. So it's trying to get apples to apples.
Thank you.
Any other discussion on this topic? All right, the motion is to accept the special education monitoring report. All those in favor? All 8-0, thank you, it passes. Thank you, Ms. Ford.
Thank you.
We'll keep talking.
If I could just make one comment. You have to understand IDEA is a federal regulation that is heavily compliance oriented. There's not too many other places in education where you're counting the number of days from one event to another and you get no excuse if it's a day late or a day early. So while I think we all, parents, you have to see the parents' face when they see an IEP for the first time and it's 42 pages long because we have to put so many compliance items in the IEP. So the balance between program quality and implementation and compliance, I agree with you. We struggle with that all the time. And it's not that we put more emphasis on compliance than program quality, but it is a compliance-heavy system right now, for better or for worse.
Okay, well, some of us, compliance should be a baseline, not the end. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the financial and staffing report. Ms. O'Donnell.
I'm not used to having my iPad up here, so it's spinning all different ways. Okay, so we're submitting the financial report as of April 25th for your approval. There was one change that I just wanted to point out, and if you've not had a chance to take a look at it, I'll certainly welcome your feedback. Over the next month or before we prepare the next report. But we did modify the grant report slightly. I know when I first started, there were some, concerns about the confusion. It sort of, wasn't so easy to read, and I've heard that a couple of times since then. So we took a stab at it. I hope it's a little easier to read. That's on page 8.
Yes, thank you for doing that. I appreciate that.
Maybe you take a motion to put this on the table.
All right.
Ms. Dayton? All right, do we have a second? Dr. Francis, thank you. Ms. Dayton, question?
I understood not one single word under areas of concern. And I really mean not a single word. They don't seem to fit together and form any kind of
I'm sorry, but it has no meaning to me, so could you walk me through it, because it starts as an area of concern and ends up with an optimistic conclusion, so it's on the page.
So I'm going to refer you to page 7, because this is the report it's trying to sort of connect with, where we show our our spend to date, and specifically, I'm going to highlight the transportation area because that's what I was speaking to here. So if you look at that section there, we're showing in this report that transportation is scheduled to be over by $300,000. But over the past couple of months, we've been working on a forecasting tool so that we could better project where we're going to end the year. And that projection is showing us to have a savings of about $500,000 instead of being over by $300,000. Just transportation, but it will help the entire budget. And as you know, we have had things that we've had to cover throughout the year, right? So what I'm trying to point out here, and I apologize for not doing that so well, is that the money has to be released from the encumbrances, so that you do see the real picture here when you're looking at this financial report. And so I hope that helps clear up. So in the next report, what you'll see is you won't see this negative 200. Hopefully what you're seeing is that savings of 400, 500.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So, Ms. O'Donnell, I have a question for you then. Do we have a sense of how we're running against the budget for the year and where we may end up? And of course, it's going to change. I understand that.
Yeah. Yes, we do. I mean, we're monitoring it as best as we could. I know I've spoken before about the fact that historically we've always looked at run rates, and I really do want to look at this differently going forward. I want to look at I want to start, doing forecasting instead of just looking at run rates. I know as of today that we have about 16 to 17% remaining in our budget as available, and that we are closing the purchase order opportunities as of tomorrow. So departments have been notified that no further purchasing can happen beyond tomorrow. So it gives us a chance to sort of, make sure we stay on track. In my mind, sort of in lieu of not having that forecast. So it's something it's a process that we really do need to implement, and we're certainly starting, and we really have to if we're going to be redesigning the budget. Forecasting will be required as part of that process.
So, where are we?
So I can't tell you.
I didn't understand a word of what you said. I understood, but do we have a general sense?
I don't have a target. I know that we can monitor it.
We're not in the red, are we? We're still solvent?
We can control it at this point because we're shutting everything down tomorrow.
Thank you. Mr. Chair.
Okay. Hey, this is what you get when you get a good controller, or someone who understands the control function and does it properly. Thank you very much. Larry, going back to the question I had is the forecast of transportation expense. It's a variance to what? The original budgeted number that was approved by the RTM?
Yes. So
it's against the original, because did we make adjustments along the way to that account? No.
No, we didn't.
Okay, so say that part again. I was almost stunned at what you said. We fully budgeted for transportation at some number, close to $8 million.
Right.
Right? I don't know what that number is. I can look it up.
Okay.
But you're suggesting is the actual may come in 500 below.
Yes.
That obviously we need that money someplace else. It's not a freebie. It's got to go someplace else.
No, well, remember we had the overages
in special ed and other places, right? So that's my point. It has to be, but that's what proper budget management is, right? But so it's fair to say, wow, okay. And at the next report, we're actually going to see this.
Yes. So the encumbrances have been reduced, so you're not seeing it on this report, but in the next one.
Congratulations to whoever made that happen. That's fantastic.
Ms. Stowe, it's a budget question, I'm sure.
It's a general question about how she's feeling. No. Quick question on capital improvements. I've moved on. I'm on to page 9. Concerned about the locker rooms at Greenwich High School because we keep hearing about this over and over. So we're at 10% complete. So what does that mean? Going to be done over the summer, I think is what the notes say?
Yes, so it actually is more than 10% complete, but we are in the construction design phase where it's, ready to be bid out, and then the work would happen over the summer. We do anticipate that we just don't have enough weeks in the summer to complete it before students come back. So there's going to be some disruption at the beginning of the year. That's all logistical stuff. We're working through it now, but we're really excited that we're able to move forward, that it was approved.
Right, there
So
was
we continue
1.2 million in the capital budget for that, right? I think that was the number.
I'm sorry?
1.2 million was in the capital budget
Yes.
for that? Yeah. All right, other questions? All right, with that, I'm going to call the question. All those in favor of accepting the financial and staffing report? 8-0, thank you very much, that passes. Next up, transfers, Ms. O'Donnell.
Okay. All right, so we have a lot of transfers here tonight for approval. Obviously, we're nearing year ends. And so, yeah, I mean, I think if there's any questions that I can answer about any of the transfers, I know my team here may be able to answer some.
All right, can we get a motion to accept the transfers? Ms. Stowe, is there a second? Ms. Olson? Any discussion? Dr. Francis?
Support of my board member.
What are you doing?
The only thing I was going to say is, can we at some point, I thought we were moving to get a resolution so we didn't have to go through all these details all the time. Are we getting any closer to that? So we would still see every $2,000 that gets shifted from one thing to the other,
And if we approve it, and hopefully it wouldn't need to go to the BET. Yep. Ms. Dayton.
It's very concerning that the board voted in the last board membership, the previous board voted on certain adjustments so that our resolutions as presented in the RTM wouldn't require us to get approval on these kind of standard grants.
We're not on the transfers. We're still on transfers.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. Keep going.
We're in transfers. I guess I will note, though, we always tend to see a lot more of these at the end of the year, which always indicates to me budgeting issues going back further than that. So I don't know, it's probably further down on your to-do list, but something to think about.
Right, I mean, we kind of hear it both ways. We could either do it at the beginning of the year, and then people will say, well, can we wait till the end of the year when you start to run out of money, or we can just save it till the end of the year, which is what they're doing.
I guess better classification when we actually budget might help with that, too.
Yep.
Just a thing. Mr. Sher.
These are small dollars.
I'm going to totally disagree with that. Anybody who's run major budgets and organizations, this is situation normal. So we should not, this is what happens when you close out a year. To a degree, you'll get forecasting in and what have you, but I would never want you guys, me personally, I would never want you to view this as any criticism. I think you guys are doing a great job managing this budget, and this is normal. And we need to recognize that it's normal. This is what, this is, no. But my point is making adjustments at the end of the year to fit in moving between classes is a totally normal situation. It's not unusual in any way.
I wasn't criticizing.
I'd like to add, if I could, that the business office is looking at the budget transfer policy.
Oh, good.
And I know we're going through the policy changes now, so I thought this would be a good time for us to bring forward a recommendation if we should find one. So what we would do is we would look to recommend or suggest modifications for improving efficiencies. So some of the modifications would be simplifying the procedures for administration and end users. In other words, if we can standardize the procedures across this process and the BET process, we'll have one simple standard document to share with all our end users, making it a little bit more clear as to what the expectations are, so that would be great to see. So I mentioned aligning between BOE and BET, obviously reducing the administrative preparation required for small dollar transfers like most of the ones that you're seeing tonight. And then of course aligning with state statute, which does speak to line item transfers, that the Board of Ed has to approve line item transfers, but doesn't speak to it necessarily being at the detailed level that you're approving them this evening. It's really more at the major object code level. So something to think about. We'd have to figure out how best to sort of summarize it and present it to you. but it's just something that we're thinking about.
Thank you. And just keep innovating. Thank you.
I'm sorry?
Keep innovating.
Okay.
That's good. All right. All those in favor of accepting the transfers? All those in favor of accepting? 7-0, 8-0. Thank you very much. Okay, that brings us to the approval of the Asia grant. So Ms. Dayton will be the first to talk after Ms. O'Donnell has an opportunity.
The previous,
Okay. All right, well, we have received a $12,900 grant from Asia Society to continue building the field of Chinese language teaching and learning in American schools. These are funds that we receive just about annually as far back as I can see. And so we're pleased to continue to support the arrangement. We're seeking your approval to allow administration to accept the grant and then to request BET and RTM approval following this.
Ms. Dayton.
so the previous board had an October work session where it discussed having a streamlined process so we wouldn't have to go before the RTM for these recurring grants. And then we voted in November at the business meeting. I'm not sure, other than federal, state, Area 9 Cable and Greenwich Alliance, why we would have to return to the BET and RTM for approval in amounts that come anywhere near $5,000. It's just such a tiny amount of money. Can you explain how we got back to the old way of doing business when we had made such strides?
I wish I could. This grant is actually almost $13,000 with an additional $900, so it would be above that $5,000 threshold. I remember that. I don't know
And
why
I
it's
had
not-
made the motion to make it to 25,000. For some reason or other, and I haven't gotten the details yet, the BET didn't see that at this point, and I guess with everything else moving along, that's one of the things they didn't decide to go to the match over. But I think it's something we should bring up again, just to simplify matters.
Ms. Dayton.
So just to refresh your memory, the board unanimously approved an increase to $50,000. Okay? And again, that was November 2017.
Mr. Sheriff.
This is getting the cobwebs in my head. It's great that we have a point of view on what the role of the BET and the RTM ought to be. The challenge with it all, and we can keep advocating and building confidence with them so that maybe they relax their controls. I think the problem we've got, Jennifer, is they want oversight, and until they give up oversight, I don't know what we can do about it. So given that's a condition that just exists, I mean, if somebody wants to go spend time advocating because this is killing them with time, let them go do it. Otherwise, this thing comes up once a year, we just make it a perfunctory. I'd rather just make it perfunctory, someone makes a motion, no discussion required, we approve it. I'd rather not, personally, I'd rather not Jill and Lori go spend a whole bunch of time trying to convince the BET and the RTM to change their practices, as frustrating as they may be. I'd rather she's working on changing to getting in forecasting, and I'd rather you spend time on that stuff than this. I agree with you, it's frustrating, but until we can get them to change, and as a board, I don't want to encourage you to spend a lot of time, because I think that is a sinkhole of time, and we got so many other things to do.
Just for clarification for the audience, that they did make a change to the resolution, so they are allowing non-federal and non-state grants, which this would be one of them. It's just that 5,000 is the limit.
Right.
So next year we can try again, to try to bump it up, but at least we got that in, which is great.
So Mr. Sheriff, did I hear you make a motion to accept the improvements?
I make a motion to accept the Asia grant as proposed.
Dr. Francis, I hear a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, signify by raising your hand. That's 8-0, it passes. Thank you. I think our budget chair, Ms. Rabin, made a note of this as an item to think about when we do our resolutions. Thank you for doing that, Ms. Rabin. All right, with that, we are at agenda planning. Close that one, open the agenda. So we would want an update on concept one at our public meeting. I think it's already there, but the board self-evaluation would be at the work session. The superintendent evaluation will make a statement at our public meeting. Board, I'm going to send an email to you about scheduling time for us to meet to discuss that. And superintendent evaluation will be at the June 14th meeting. Board self-evaluation at the work session. Was there anything else that needed to be added to the agenda plan? Okay, and I think we may get the new lab FF&E. It's just giving a board an update from the new lab building committee as to where they are on actually putting things inside of the building. It's amazing. And IT as well, yes. Mr. Dunn's not here, but that's that. Ms. Dayton.
Will the May 22nd public forum on the master facility plan be recorded on video and stored on our website?
Yes.
Right.
Great. And the work, yeah, unfortunately the POCD was having a public forum tonight. I think they're taking comments also by email.
Also, they taped it.
They taped it, fantastic. Also on Thursday night, our board has a retreat. We're talking about 2 items. One is the budget redesign process, and the other is sort of the layout for the review of the master facility plan. So that'll be following the forum. So that's next Thursday. And with that, I will take a motion to adjourn. Dr. Francis, all those in favor of adjourning? We are adjourned. Thank you very much.